Happy Holy Day, Moors, and welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. Reawakening Minds, we are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all. We just want to remind you that the views, opinions, and services of our lecturers are theirs and did not necessarily reflect those of the House of Reawakening Minds. We are happy, excited as we always are once again to have with us tonight Grand Sheik National Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey. Let's receive him.
Thank you. Welcome to the House of Reawakening Minds. And just as an interim, I want to give credits to Tamara for operating the camera and the computer, and a lot of people in the background to make things happen. You don't see them, but we want to give her a hand too, and Dr. Nail for maintaining the again, those of you who, like I said earlier, who have the Zodiac Constitution, who read the Zodiac Constitution, particularly the area where CMA makes mention to that when you hire a lawyer or an attorney, that you actually give them your birthright. And I like to borrow that for a minute. Can you bring that up? I'd like to borrow that for a minute. Now, Zodiac Constitution, and I want to bring this up. Now, the Zodiac Constitution was set forth by CMA and registered in the Library of Congress, and this is AA 222141, which I know many of you who read some of my works, particularly Lesson Book 14 and 14A1, Protocols of Liberty. I've mentioned AA 222141. Now, one of the things I did when I did Lesson Book 14 in the late 80s, and we published it in the early 90s, deliberately splitting the books and editing the books because of the level of consciousness of the people, and also knowing politically that the Moorish Divine National Movement had been infiltrated. Because I've already, done research into the FBI papers and into some of the stuff that was redacted. And knowing that many Moors in the temple who've never been exposed to the FBI papers and have not done research into Calvin Coolidge, Praetor for the United States Service Corporation Company, and J. Edgar Hoover and the COINTELPRO operations would attack this information on not recognizing and supporting them. Do you understand? It's sort of like tunnel vision. Some of the people are trained in tunnel vision, and they are unwilling to think outside the box, even when you have operative or proven information that will do them some good. Now, CMA registered the Zodiac Constitution in the Library of Congress mainly so that they could not tamper with it. And this was done in the 40s, if you get the point. And much of CMA's work is actually a countermeasure to the operations of the infiltrators in the Moorish movement, which many people in the Moorish movement will not talk about that from that perspective. They would reject CMA, but I'm also part of the Great Seal. And of course, I've always done research, and I'm already aware of that information, if you get the point. And I've always taken the position that if you find information that can help the people in the movement, you don't lock yourself into, say, a fence of thought without looking at other truths. And it's sort of like what Noble Ali said. He said, the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you'd go back to sleep. And what you'll find that a lot of people get caught up into what you call trains of thought, and they close themselves off to actual factual information that can actually help. Now, in the Zodiac Constitution, in relationship to courtrooms, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want to touch on something to give you a concept relative to the birthright. Because on the article, as an example, each one of the articles pretty much deal with the things that affect us, if you get the point. And in law and in human communications, your greatest protection in a political forum is a written constitution. These are fundamentals that must be understood. And as you know, as our illustrious prophet Noble set up the old Canaanite temple and the temple of science, and because of the infiltration and the problems that he was having, in 1928, at a special meeting on July the 20th, he had a special meeting, and then they, within a month or so, adopted the corporate name Moorish Science Temple of America for the Moorish Temple of Science. And as you'll see in Newark, New Jersey, where he founded the movement, the temple there is still maintained as the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, in harmony with Girardi's original work. And among, as far as my research has been at this point, among the signees of the assigned adepts that Girardi had at that special meeting, merely ill, as I understood it, for my research, has been pretty much the one who has maintained the closest integrity to the civic foundation operations as Girardi originally set them up, and teaching constitutional principle and constitutional enforcement in relationship to protecting the profit, the movement, and the birthright of the people, etc., as well as preparing them for taking their places among the affairs of men. Logically, that's an international forum, and constitutional enforcement is necessary for that to take place. Without that, you cannot take your place among the affairs of men. And what you will find is a lot of people who profess honor, in the Moorish movement, will be found to be wanting, extremely wanting in that area. And so they will usually not go into that area so that the people don't pay attention to the fact that they've been wanting in that area. And they have fallen short in that area extremely. And the people have suffered much because that work has not been done. And that was one of the reasons why C.M. Bey did what he did. But it's also why I founded the Roundtable in 1982 and started sharing actually lessons that I was preparing for my own children. That's originally what I founded the Roundtable for. And I would address a lot of the things that I already knew because I always studied anyway. And so when I came into the Moorish movement, it was like a home platform for me for doing what I was already doing. But I also, by virtue of being in a pattern of research, already had some information, and I would go to Washington myself physically and go to the Library of Congress, and I would go to law libraries too, and do research. I'd go get original papers, and I knew how to research congressional records as a pattern. And so quickly and logically, I did not have what you would call that, and I don't say it with a negative intent, a spooky view, a spooky, worshipful, holy roly, hallelujah to you kind of mentality. Look at this movement. I look at this movement as a social, political, spiritual movement, realistically, that was set forth to actually functionally solve problems for people who are both uneducated in the matters that most affect them and are really not aware of the real history. They've been lacking in fundamental geography, definitely lacking in basic grammar as far as etymology or the capacity to do research or to look at instruments, put a timeline on them based on its etymology, and then use the etymology principle also in fundamental research, and to be able to trace false intent, false false resentments, things taken out of context, and stuff like that. You know, just basic, really basic stuff. But what you begin to recognize as you study and travel and deal with people, you'll see that a lot of these tools that should have been given to them factually, you know, in the Moorish movement, by instructions by Noble Ali, was deliberately held back. And what you see, a lot of times these same people don't recognize when you're sharing with them with things that they should have gotten, and they're thinking that you're giving them something new or giving them something contrary to the movement because it's not following the party line, kind of like thing. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And fortunately, it's both unfortunate and fortunate at the same time. Fortunately, we have people like Dr. Naila who would make a platform like this available where free thinking can be done, and the trolls and the suppressants and those who support expurgatorius and those who support prohibitorum cannot restrict the information from the people. Because a lot of times when you're really telling real truths about the real politics and the sociology, the very ones who should have been doing it anyway are the first ones who will attack you. You know, like a lot of things that we've been sharing with the people should have been taught to them in the temples 70 years ago, 80 years ago, 90 years ago. Truthfully, you know. So again, I'm not belaboring that issue, but it is a fact. And what you begin to recognize is by the people not having enforced the Constitution as Noble Ali instructed, by virtue of not getting involved in that type of platform, they actually missed a lot of information and concepts that should be grounded in them already as a normal thing. And so altogether, and peripheral to that, is one of the reasons why I want to go through this House Committee report, right? But at the same time, what I'm going to do, with the fact that I'm reading past this, if you get the point. This is the House Committee report. So I'll interject other knowledge so that you can look at this differently. So, like, say, if you're really a political scholar, or if you know the history, you'll read this differently than someone who's just reading this and don't know the politics. So when you read this, you have the advantage because you all know that the United States is a private service corporation company and not the country. You know that the country is actually Morocco under occupation from Britain through the United States Service Corporation, European colonists who have been pretending to be Americans and have rewritten the history and fooled the people. That's what's in operation. That's the fact. That's the absolute fact. Now, people who are looking at information like this and don't know that, they're going to take this as legitimate government, thinking that the United States is the land and is the legitimate government, and their communications will be according to that. But when you know better, you know that you have to deal with them because they're occupying your land. You have to deal with them because they're controlling your resources. You respect them like you respect the rattlesnake, but you don't honor the rattlesnake. When you don't honor them, you respect them because they're dangerous. But you deal with them intelligently and according to law and principle. Are we clear? And so it's important to know what you're dealing with in order to not to assume that they're operating in your interest. They never are. And you would never be blinded by that no matter how they approach you. Are we clear? You don't need to be hostile, but you need to be diligent and intelligent. Are we clear? So let us go with the House Committee report. You can turn that light out just for a minute after we're going to read this, and then we'll go into this. Yeah. Is that better for you to see? For the camera and stuff like that. Now, this is the September of 1950, actually. And because I mentioned earlier 52, 53, but it's actually 1950. When you're looking at this House Committee report on un-American activities, for those of you, and so I'm going to give you reference that's not necessarily here. so that you can do research on your own, so you can also know certain comments that I make that are peripheral to this but are not included in this report. This is about a 2-page report. Keep in mind the Lewis McFadden Congressional Records reports on Lewis McFadden of 1932 and 1934. Now, and at the same time, included to this, keep in mind, the flash drive that we share with people from the House of Reawakening Minds. On that flash drive, and Dr. Naila, has the flash drive available for people. You'll see House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th, 1933, and that is referred to as the report from Traficant, when Traficant made that report on the 93. Keep that in mind that Traficant was actually making reference, that was not mentioned in his report directly, of Lewis McFadden of 1932, who was preparing to sue members of the board of directors of the Federal Reserve, for severe breach of trust and treason, etc. And as you do some research on Lewis McFadden, you'll find that when he went to visit his daughter in New York, they poisoned him. And they killed him. Which they do. They do that. No different than they killed John Kennedy and others, anyone that went against the operations of the Inquisition. Now, and this is also, so don't think that I'm running on. I'm just throwing things in there for you to research, so that when you're looking at this, you look at this a little differently. Keep in mind also, in recent years, the letter from Pope Francis to Barack H. Obama called Civil Orders. All of those things, look at those things together and then consider this. Then also on the flash drive, we share with you the Crown owns the U.S. Read that article and put this in context also. All right? All right. So now let's go over this. Now, if anyone wants to share, you give the mic and we can read a couple paragraphs. If anybody wants to share, if not, I'll begin to read this. All right. National Lawyers Guild, and keep this in mind when you think in the Zodiac Constitution also. National Lawyers Guild, its acronym is NLG. Legal Bulwark of the Communist Party, September 1950, House Committee on Un-American Activities. The House Committee on Un-American Activities, HUAC, was an investigative committee of the United States House of Representatives. It was originally created in 1938 to uncover citizens with Nazi ties within the United States. However, it has become better known for its role in investigating alleged disloyalty and subversive activities on the part of private citizens, public employees, and those organizations suspected of having communist ties. In 1969, the House of Representatives changed the House Committee's name to House Committee on Internal Security. Now notice and keep that in mind. One of the tricks that I've noticed in doing research over the years is that the general board of directors who are representing them as Congress will constantly change the names of reports and things so that people can't follow and do research. You'll get lost. So this is another reason why it's important to have a background and to understand how they build certain things. So always be aware, not only will they change names of peoples and places, etc., and things, they will change names of records deliberately, and you may find this changed again, and then again. And so most of the time, if you see one thing and not see the other, you make no relationship, so you'll find no linear path where you can do research. This is done by them to cover up their own corruption. Are we clear? I just want to remind you of that. So look for things like that, and don't be surprised at that and expect that from them. But I'm giving you one of the things that I recognize in doing research, a pattern that they do, is to cover up their corruption. Now, when the House of Representatives abolished the committee in 1995, now see, so now they have one name, the House Committee on Un-American Activities, right? Then the House Committee's name became the House Committee on Internal Security, and then in 1975, they abolished it, and then its functions were transferred to the House Judiciary Committee. You see, that's 3 times right there. And then they abolished its functions, which means they were covering up the corruption that they found that they were investigating. And so you need to recognize that, you know, because the real deal is the whole platform is corrupt. And so you have corruptors trying to argue about corruption. And then they get to a point they cover up because they got to protect themselves because the whole platform is corrupt. Been corrupt since 1861. All right? And so the House Committee's anti-communist investigations are often compared with those of Senator Joseph McCarthy. And those of you know some of the contemporary politics at North America, this is referred to as the McCarthy era. And this is when they were in Hollywood and everywhere else looking for communists and stuff like that, and blackballing certain people, blah, blah, stuff like that. So McCarthy, as a United States Senator, had no direct involvement with the House Committee. McCarthy was the chairman of the Government Operations Committee and its permanent subcommittee on investigations of the United States Senate, not the House. Now, the National Lawyers Guild was organized in 1936 by a caucus of Communist Party, United States of America. The lawyers assisted by the International Labor Defense, an American agency, on the Common Term, and the Common Term is the name they gave to the Communist International, all right? And the National Lawyers Guild remains an active affiliate of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, an international communist front which operated under the control of the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And the International Department took over the old Comintern that was disbanded by Stalin during World War II. And of course, that would give you another branch of study with Stalin, Hitler, and all of those things in Europe. And also for you to recognize, when you begin to recognize the politics, where people who really understand the politics doesn't look at Stalin and Hitler and them as being separate from the operations here in North America. And this is very important for you to understand that those politics are absolutely tied together. And so people will be looking at things like that. It's totally separate from here, and it isn't. A lot of the stuff that went there take place right in the Congress here, and a lot of the planning, a lot of the activities, if you get the whole point. Right from the lawyers. Now, while you're looking at this, keep this in mind. Also in your research, original Article Amendment 13 of the Constitution, the nobility clause, why it's not taught in schools, why it's not exposed to the people in constitutional studies. Also, why certain people in different organizations who have been charged by their constitutions and charters to enforce the Constitution or to help the great missionary work of enforcing that Constitution, why they don't do it and why they haven't done it, and why they criticize people like me who talk about stuff like this. Because they were actually put in place to enforce this stuff and to enforce this law, and they've done exactly not that. And they don't want people to recognize that they've actually been in breach of trust for decades and have gotten away with it. And so this is part of the great sellout that nobody wants to talk about. And if you want to really understand this thing, let's just keep it simple. If someone is set up with a charter and the responsibility and bylaws to enforce the Constitution for the United States, and you see no track record of them doing that, and particularly if they ever speak against anybody who does do that, they just expose themselves. You don't need to expose them, they've exposed themselves. But also, they become sensitive when people start studying these things, because it also exposes them, because once the people start studying congressional records and looking at the breaches that you will find, and studying international law and constitutional law according to, say if somebody comes into the Morsi Bond National Movement, sincerely, right? And they read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, and remember that's a plural. Divine warning by the prophet for the nations, which is a plural statement, and an international statement. And then they notice in the divine warning by the prophet for the nations that he says, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America. That's a direct charge. Then if they go to the divine constitutional bylaws and look at Act 1, where the chairman and the moderator of the Moorish Science Temple is put in power to make law and enforce law, and according to, if they're living according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and is known by the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, which means the members are supposed to know that they're enforcing this law. And then you go there, and then you start looking at their track record, and you see none of that ever taking place. They don't even talk this kind of stuff. Many of them will literally say that Drawley never taught civics, when constitutional enforcement is absolutely civics. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying to you? Now, someone who's naive, who does not do critical thinking or research, it doesn't dawn on them that these people are in breach. But a person who's being objective and just dealing with information recognizes breach immediately. Do you understand? So now a person who understands law and constitutional principle will not stand for that, whereas a person who's naive, will go along the program not knowing they're being betrayed, because they don't read and they don't do critical thinking. And this is why I tell you, look at things like a reporter. Just look at the information. And what it tells you is what it is. And when you find falsehood, you either defend the truth or you don't. You take a position.
Wow.
Now, the point of it is, our people's lack of knowledge in these areas have injured us on many fronts. Because in spite of the people's lack of knowledge and lack of information, these people in these institutions and agencies have been waging war, economic and political, on our people every day. And our people don't even know that these people are actually waging war on them. They just think they don't like them. They're actually waging war on us. They've been waging war on us and using government platform to carry it out. This is another reason why I'm doing this report. Are we clear? But I'm reading between the lines because I know the other parts of the history, that they're not going to tell. All right? So, So a study prepared by the Central Intelligence Agency, that's the CIA, which you already know, but you must also know that the CIA actually belongs to the Jesuits. This is another thing you're going to find out when you start doing research, So a study prepared by the Central Intelligence Agency at the direction of the House Intelligence Committee in 1978 reported that the International Association of Democratic Lawyers has been one of the most useful Communist front organizations at the service of the Soviet Communist Party. In the 31 years of the International Association of Democratic Lawyers' existence, it has so consistently demonstrated its support of Moscow's foreign policy objectives and is so tied in with other front organizations and the communist press that it is difficult for it to pretend that its judgments are fair or relevant to basic legal tenets. In other words, they're really operating against the Republic and the Constitution and always have been. And then once you understand the nobility clause, you understand this report too. But you also understand this report is briefed. But if you understand the history, you can read even beyond that. Are we clear? And you can turn the light back up. Flip that up to the second page. Let's see if we got some more stuff. Yeah. So let me finish reading this, then make a comment. Make your comment. Yeah. So, International Association of Democratic Lawyers President Pierre Cot, an official of the World Peace Council, WPC, the principal Soviet International Communist Front, was even awarded the Lenin Peace Prize in 1953. Now, in September of 1950, the House Committee on Un-American Activities issued a report, the National Lawyers Guild Legal Bulwark of the Communist Party, which stated, the real aim of the National Lawyers Guild, as demonstrated conclusively by its activities, are not specified in its constitution or statement of avowed purpose, in order to attract non-communists to serve as a cover for its actual purposes, as an appendage to the Communist Party. The National Lawyers Guild poses benevolently as a professional organization which shall function as an effective social force in the service of the people, when actually it's opposite. That's the real actual truth. And with the extensive revival of the National Lawyers Guild in the late 1960s, and the recruitment of a broad section of new leftists who looked not to Moscow but to the surrogate regimes of Havana, Hanoi, or Angola for models of revolutionary change, the National Lawyers Guild has had an increasingly close relationship with the Cuban regime. And the National Lawyers Guild International Committee formed numerous subcommittees that coordinate both legal action and public relations and propaganda in support of various Soviet and Cuban-backed revolutionary terrorist movements. For example, the National Lawyers Guild's Middle East Subcommittee supported the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, and issued a blatantly biased report against Israeli legal and security measures against jailed terrorists. I'll flip it up down. The National Lawyers Guild's Vietnam Subcommittee pressed for the United States economic aid and reparations to the Hanoi government and urged recognition and support of the Vietnamese puppet state set up in Cambodia after the invasion and conquest of North Vietnamese army. Now, when you look at this, and it gives the impression that they were supporting the PLO or the Palestinian argument, when actually the platform was fronted for that when they're actually working the opposite. And this is the interesting thing, how they front one way, but they're actually subverting another way. And this is what our people need to know, what they've been doing to us, too. In other words, they look like they're supporting you, and they're actually in to get near you, to bed you. And what they call bedding you is befriend, embrace, devour. All right? Now, so in 1978, a group of independent Marxists within the National Lawyers Guild membership published a document criticizing the National Lawyers Guild leadership for conducting guild affairs as though we were a committee Marxist-Leninist entity. The National Lawyers Guild, or Democratic Caucus, complained that the National Lawyers Guild International Committee identifies the organization with the positions of the socialist countries on every major international issue. Bright fellows, those Democrat congressmen, but then embarrassed ones too. And through their dual memberships in the American Civil Liberties Union and their activities in other communist front organizations such as the National Emergency Civil Liberties Committee, leading National Lawyers Guild activists, including those working to defend terrorist organizations such as Fuerzas Armadas de Liberación Nacional of Puerto Rico and the Weather Underground Organization, have played the most prominent role in the myriad of lawsuits against the Central Intelligence Agency, Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and local intelligence agencies. Now, so a lot of things they do would be fronts that look like they're really doing good and actually be supporting absolutely the opposite. Now, and of course, the more that they dug in there, the more they start tracing stuff even back to themselves. Again, this is why they started shutting stuff down, because it's like a bunch of criminals trying to argue about a bunch of criminals when they really create or competing for spoils that they're both stealing. It's sort of like what you see the Europeans doing now. They're pitting Americans against Americans so that you can forget the fact that they're not the Americans. As an example, you have different foundations of politicians, most of whom you'll know, who are funding what they're called, this so-called surge across the Mexican border of so-called refugees and stuff like that, right? Now, what they're doing is criticizing Americans, because remember, all of our family in the South, they're Americans. They are brothers and sisters. They're Americans. And here's Europeans who are occupying North America talking about them Americans as if them Americans are foreigners.
Right.
And you understand? And then people up here who really don't understand the politics are falling for it and following the party line. When actually most of those people are just paid what you call chaos makers. Are not really the people of the land, but paid chaos makers. So when you're talking about people from Honduras, you're talking about Americans. When you talk about people from Mexico, you're talking about Americans. When you talk about people from the islands, you're talking about Americans. When you talk about people from Central America, you're talking about Americans. And who's talking about Americans and complaining about Americans coming to another part of America? Europeans who are not Americans, who've been pretending to be Americans, who are fake occupiers, who've been complaining about Americans and getting away with it. My point with you is stop letting them get away with that. And when they start that crap, you counter it. And never support anything that they're doing when they're criticizing our brothers and sisters from the islands or from South America. That's our family. And when they criticize them, you criticize them Europeans and remind them that they're Europeans and they're not the Americans. And they don't have a right to talk about Americans. You understand what I'm saying to you? Go ahead.
That I wanted to point out on there that on that agency, that CIA agency.
Yes.
Take note that the agency. Those people were hired by someone. The FBI, all those agencies were hired by someone to do what they're doing. But that's something I had to figure out, you know. But you gotta look into who hired them. When you find out who hired them, that follows the paper trail back to who started this stuff.
All right, now let's look at this. Just as you're saying, this is very simple. All you need to do, no, you can turn the lights back on. Because that's just a 2 page of a short report. But I want to use that as an interjection. The FBI, CIA, IRS, Federal Reserve, all of your alphabet soup orders are actually constructs de facto of the National Lawyers Guild. And all of them that have been designed to actually undermine the Republic's Constitution and actually have been designed to actually attack the people under the name of securing them. They have not been securing the people. They've been attacking the people and dismantling their rights and their divine rights and their birthrights and converting them into privileges and licenses in violation of the Constitution under the guise of supporting law or supporting the country, and they're really supporting their private corporation operations that's run from Fleet Street in England, which is really the Circle Church, which is really their home base. And again, they are really attorneys and they're acting as attorneys, lawyers, and esquires. Once you understand these principles, you understand why CMB say when you hire a lawyer, you have given them your birthright. And then you'll understand also why they will generally not tell the people that the Jesuits and the Vatican owns the CIA and the FBI. You know, so it's not look who's paying them, look who ordered them. The Social Security operations, etc. All of those came from basically the SS operations of Hitler, part of which was constructed right here in North America under the board of trustees calling themselves congressmen. Hitler did not act alone. That must be clear. And of course, the scientists which were used, the German scientists which were used by Hitler, etc., dealing with a lot of the ancient technology, dealing with the Bhagavad Gita, etc., in basic, in Sindh, or what you call India, and the Vedas, etc. The flying machines that they're using now is ancient stuff. Give it a mic for a minute. Give it a mic for a minute. And so the deal of it is a lot of technology of NASA, etc., actually came from Nazi. The Nazis, you know. So these things must be also put in place. And the major ones who have been operating in Congress to make these things possible has been the National Lawyers Guild, who are a member in the people calling themselves Congress, in breach of the Constitution Nobility Clause, because they, by law, cannot, should not ever hold an office under the Republic of the United States. So this is again why you look through this stuff when you're reading this. Go ahead, Dr. Nayo.
Islam, I just wanted to camel back on what you were just saying about the ones that come over from Nazi Germany. Just was doing like last night, studying something with regard to that and the technology and the fact that when Wernher von Braun came over, who was the head, I guess the space guru of the time, when he came over, they were trying to avoid prosecution, so he asked for about 100 scientists, key scientists to come with him, but before it was over 1,500
yes.
Nazi scientists came to the United States. They created what we know now as NASA,
yes,
among
exactly
other things. And they came under something called Operation Paperclip.
Paperclip, exactly. And this again, Dr. Naila, just some of these little fundamental surface truths. You can dig deeper in them, but a lot of these surface truths about the real politics should be known in what you would call general reports of the newspaper that Drawley set up, that he commanded the Moors to maintain, which was, he said, this is our most powerful weapon in the hand of our group. And all you need to recognize is the effort that was done by the Grand Governors and the Grand Chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple of America to absolutely eliminate Noble Drawley's newspaper, which Drawley said was our most powerful weapon. These things, when you start really just doing research, you can see the severe breaches of trust, and you can see why nobody goes into detail into what is called the Great Sellout. But the deal of it is become injurious to our people, because Moorish Americans with nationality cards have been injured under the Negro Act, which should have been stopped years ago when they got their nationality cards. And they have been suffering under the Christian black codes that should have been eliminated when they got their nationality cards, because the Constitution should have been enforced, and it was not and has not been. And they've been, stealing their houses under the breach of trust. They've been jailing them under straw arguments, 14th Amendment, getting away with it, doing all kinds of horrid domestic terrorist things against the people, continuing the Spanish Inquisition under the guise of Homeland Security and stuff like that. And when you know the real history, logically, you know better and you see these things and you can see through those things. But again, recognizing that the masses who really don't understand the operations of the National Lawyers Guild need to understand it is not an innocent organization, it's actually a communist front. You know, and when you look at that, go into the military manual operations, which will give you a demonstration, and the fundamental details between the democracy operations, which is what's been operating now under the National Lawyers Guild, and the board of directors who've been representing themselves as congressmen, and the fact of the Republic order established at Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution for the United States, to which they are actually bound by oath. And that severe breach there. And you'll find that the severe breach, not only in, say, Article 1 of the Constitution, Section 10, you'll see the severe breach in Article 3 of the judicial powers, including Article 3, Section 2, with diversity of nationality in the Article 3 enforcement of consular court, which Eisenhower shut down in '56. Then you look at the breaches with Franklin Delano Roosevelt with House Joint Resolution 192 of 33. And so you would not only look at, say, the coup d'etat in the Lincoln administration of 1861, March the 27th, you would look at what Woodrow Wilson did in 1913 as a countermeasure to the withdrawal. You would look at what they did in 1925 when he registered the Morris Temple of Science as a civic organization. And then, of course, that affected their operations, and they set up another shell, United States shell, in 1925 with that corporate paper. And then you look at 1933 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt again, and then you look at the letter to Barack H. Obama, and you see an absolute correlation of that operations. Go ahead, Brother James.
That, you were talking about the Mexican brothers from Mexico.
Yeah.
Mexico, from what I found out, my research extends all the way to Canada and across the United States.
Of course.
It's all Mexico.
Of course.
The Europeans got you thinking down here in the south.
Of course.
In the north.
Yeah, once you know the history, once you know the history, now the point of it is that it is important for us to put ourselves in the frame of mind of connecting those things back. And you know, it is not, and James, also correlating with what you just shared, when you look at, say, chapter 47, dealing with the aggregate geographical parameters of the Moorish Empire, the general, you know, longitude and latitude, aggregate. And he says North America, South America, Central America, including Mexico. That is not a random statement. See, because, like, say, when you're doing what you call research, or when people are presenting information, or what you would call key information, they will make certain statements that may seem redundant, because of course you know that Mexico is North and Central America, right? So you already know that. So he says when he's making an aggregate dispensation of the aggregate geographical location of the Moorish Empire, we talk about, you know, northeast, southeast Africa, across the Great Atlantis, you know, the North America, Central America, South America, including Mexico. Now, there's two things there which you'll find out. Thank you so much. It is not only a deliberate directive to you, because now, keep in mind, when C.M. Bey did his research, what is one of the things that he did that a lot of people don't talk about? He went directly to Mexico and talked to some of the elders to get a lot of the information of the Moorish history that's registered in the Library of Congress. And Juali left the keys with what? Including Mexico. When it's like redundant. It's like saying, well, we're going to Wilmington, we're going to Delaware, including Wilmington.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Well, Wilmington's located at Delaware. Why do you need to emphasize that? Because there's a signal. And so you're also talking about what? The Great Pyramid of the Sun. You see, so now he's making placement. See, but once you go back to the state of mind of your ancient mothers and fathers, then you find out, as soon as you go into ancient Mexico history, then you find out Aunt Hagar. Now, so Aunt Hagar is buried in the Kaaba in Mecca, right? But Aunt Hagar ruled in the Yucatan. Do you see? I mean, see, once you start doing research, you will start seeing a lot of things, little keys that Juali dropped, and you wouldn't even, if you don't do research, it would never dawn on you that he's actually giving you directions. Do you understand what I'm saying? Thinking, ancient Mesopotamia and Babylonia, etc., and be thinking only on the other side of the river, and it wouldn't dawn on them the Grand Canyon here, North Kentucky and Tennessee area, Lower Egypt, and Mexico. Scholars know that, but I'm just making that point to you. Go ahead, Tamara.
Islam Grand Sheik. Our brothers and sisters of Central America, they're very aware of it. I travel there every year, and as soon as I arrive at my resort, the first thing they say is, "Welcome home."
Yeah, and this is why I say to you, whereas a lot of the nationals, when they don't see that black energy on you, and we're not talking culture, we're talking mentality,
Right.
that dead culture. They can actually see energy
Right.
on you when you're not under the dark cloud, and they'll talk to you bluntly.
Absolutely.
They'll talk to you bluntly.
They'll take you to places that they would not take. Like if you're on a tour, like when I'm out of the country, I like to go to the local area. So you always go on a tour, but a lot of time I find myself, end up with a tour guide saying, "Hey, let me show you this. Let me show you this. Let me show you this, sister. Let me show you this." So I'm getting extra information and taking pictures of things that the other people that's on the tour, they like, "Oh no, that's off limits."
Because it's your stuff. What is difficult is showing these people who for generations have thought that human beings was identified by colors, not even knowing that they were actually the rulers here, and not knowing that this is their land, north, central, south, and the islands. And that they're actually thinking in their own mind, divided not only against each other, separated from their own land, don't even know their home.
Within, absolutely. And on my solo return, I traveled up to the territory of New York, and I wanted to go into the Money Museum just so I can, document some things as well. Come to find out, it's mysteriously closed. No reason why, but it's closed.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I'll just go in the Federal Hall and check that out and see what's going on in there. Some of the great lies and the great truths that's in there. One thing I took a picture of, I'm looking at my phone, it's a Spanish real coin, 1739. Spanish money circulated widely in America.
Yeah.
So, this is very, very well aware that we're all connected.
Now, and what this is what you know. This is what you know when you do research. Spanish is a mid-century social name made up by Europeans.
Yes.
It's really a cover-up of Moorish history.
Hispaniola.
Yes. Even the language, when they say Spanish, it's not Spanish, it's Moorish Latin.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And once you start doing research, your whole look on the world changes because you know, in other words, you can even see things that are deliberately hidden. One of the disappointing things I find, and I think you recognize this too, Tamara, is when you run into scholars and sheiks who know these things, who have been deliberately holding this information back from Moorish Americans who should have been teaching them these things in schools, in the temples years ago, so that as this information is coming out to the world, that there would not be appearance of divisions amongst the Moors that really is not justified. When you actually have Moorish Americans who have really been miseducated by their leadership. By denial. Islam, go ahead, brother.
You were saying before about the Wizard of Oz, how Dorothy clicked her heels together and they said, "You're home." Remember?
Yes.
You're home. That's what they meant. It's in the Wizard of Oz. They hide it in these.
When they talk about Dorothy, when telling her home, she's home.
Well, it's not hidden. Because
It
in the Constitution,
Give it a mic.
it's not hidden. It's just that we're too entertained.
Right, exactly.
Because the Constitution indicates that it must preserve the arts of the truth and the discoveries.
Yeah.
So those discoveries are placed in the arts of what we see in the movies, television, theater, arts, things of that nature. So it's there. It's just that we have to stop
And know what you're looking at.
and know what we're looking at and stop being entertained and look for the memories that we wanted to start segments called Message in the Movie.
Yes.
It's there.
Yes.
It's in all of them.
They're actually telling you.
Yes. But but when you say awaken, I would say, as Grand Sheik and as we know, it's in all of our cellular memory. Right. We have to just be still long enough to allow that vibration to rise to that level to see what's there.
Yes.
And once you are at that point of not wanting to, and I think a lot of the fear comes from family, ties, things of that nature.
The grooming, the black codes grooming.
Indoctrination.
That's the black codes
From the
grooming.
family structure and things that my grandmother told me this, my mother told me this, and not wanting to break away and feeling like you're isolating yourself from your family.
Because remember, one of the things that they would do with the black codes is anybody who, like an example, if you had a member who tried to preserve any of the culture or who taught reading, they would be attacked. And then the others were trained to condemn that or isolate that person, as being anti-Christian. And of course, over a few generations, that became what is known as so-called black spiritual culture or Negro culture. And so the dead culture itself actually promoted the Christian black codes under the subtlety of Negro spirituality. As an example, another example of that would be whereas you had a lot of Moors would preserve a lot of the cultures in which we would call good spell, rap, and songs, which is called gospel. And gospel didn't begin in the church. Gospel was brought into the church and then corrupted into begging songs. When actually they were actually songs or code systems that were set up for maintaining culture, maintaining knowledge, path routes, map routes, a lot of the old passages that the Europeans were covering up, a lot of the what you call sacred sites on the land, a lot of the cosmological knowledge, culture of Islam, we're talking about the science, not spookiness, was preserved in old gospel songs. And gospel was actually what is called good spell to cast off the bad spells of the Constantinian order doctrine that they would call the Christian doctrine, hiding under Christianity, which would be actually the order of Cretans of Constantine, which is disguised among the people as Christianity, which of course is destructive and designed to destroy our families. And so this is where you have that psychology that when you're brave enough to do critical thinking, that your family members would ostracize you. That's where that actually comes from the Christian black codes. And so if you start doing anything that's critical thinking, it would be a sin, considered a sin by the Christians. Oh, you're thinking for yourself. You're supposed to give up your mind to the Lords of London. No, I mean we mean the Lord in heaven. No, we're really talking about the Lords of London. And that's so-called black culture. And so over a few generations, you can kind of understand what you see in the street now. You know, and you can understand the negative that you see in our communities among people who are really technically the heirs to the world's wealthiest estate and have absolutely nothing because they have no access to it, you know. But again, this is why it's important for people to understand that the National Lawyers Guild is in fact at the center of a lot of what is called colored legislation that maintains this whole fraud of the system. It's another reason I brought this up as a subject matter, because many people not knowing that they're actually attorneys and not attorneys. And this is also back to blending the expanded knowledge on the operations of the crown, you know, and that the crown is not just like we talk about the Queen of England and the so-called royal families of Europeans. The crown is actually the bankers and the lawyers and attorneys collectively operating at North America and in England, and who are operating, or what you would call, they would be called well-dressed field Roman soldiers, whereas the police order is what you call the aggregate army for the community to enforce the imposition. The lawyers are really what you would call the backboard canvassmen that appear innocent. This is another reason why it's important for you to know this and to be able to read between the lines, etc. And so when people are dealing with them, they're not aware that they are actually dealing with the enemy, and that they take all the information, make data, and then make new attacks on the people. And what their favorite thing to use their own words is this: shooting situations instead of bullets. I quote, write this down, this is very important. This is their own words. This is both the politicians, the priesthood, and the lawyers and attorneys. In relationship to the people of the land that they have branded as peoples of color, their programming operations is this: shooting situations instead of bullets, but expecting the same result. It's indirect biological warfare. Now that's their own military, Rex 84 and Executive Order 11490. That's their own position. Now once you understand the nature of their operations, logically your thought patterns will be different on how you deal with everything. And this is back to, as James was talking earlier, and as you were talking, Tamara, and also inclusive of what Dr. Naila shared. Why I take the position, once you begin to examine these things, you know, just like a reporter, you begin to lose your naivety. And when you lose your naivety, the mystery dies. And then when the mystery dies, the fear dies with it. But then you also recognize your violations against yourself and your violations against divine law when you step back and see where you were and start recognizing that spirit on people around you that you never paid. That's normal. And you see really how buried our people are in the dark north. They're buried actually within themselves.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? For lack of knowledge.
Yep.
And so when you look at the Bible, Septuaginta, etc., when it says, my people are destroyed by the day for lack of knowledge, you can really understand that and you can relate to it. But you can also see it's more bigger and prevalent than you actually gave credit to it to be. You're actually living it. But in doing it, you also begin to it starts to give you a level, and it's not a self-righteous statement that I'm making, so don't mistake it. You start, it gives you an opportunity to assess yourself by looking at your own development, because as you become more enlightened, you start recognizing the darkness around you. And even while you're growing, you start don't know the dark clouds on them. They actually think they're being spiritual. Really, they actually think they're being spiritual. But that doesn't make you spiritually necessary, but it makes you more cognate, or what you call conscious, because you're starting to look at things realistically, which means you have shed a lot of your naivety. My position is this: we should all seek knowledge. We should all be critical thinkers. We should not promote tunnel vision in any form, from any format. We should always be prepared to change your position once you find truth. Truth should be your religion. And the seeking of truth should be your religion. And one of the major tenets of what you would call justified spiritual or social instruction would be this: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And if you use those fundamentals as a rule of operations, for the most part, you'll pretty much stay safe in the karmic realm of your activities. And also, in looking at things with a critical eye, and also applying just fundamental etymology. And of course, the more detailed you get into etymological studies, the better. But even fundamental etymology will liberate you from a lot of misconceptions, and you use those tools, and you train others around you to use those basic elementary tools. And you'd be surprised how much BS that they can peel off themselves, and how much they can be baptized. How much they can cleanse themselves of misinformation. And this is one of the things I recognize too, Tamara. A lot of times when if you go into a lot of detailed sociology revelation and expose a lot of the social engineering by putting timelines on it, and people stop taking social engineering that's contemporary and interjecting it retroactive into a timeline period that it doesn't belong, which is often a practice that's done by our people, which is also why sometimes they don't understand some of this stuff, because they're taking social engineering terms, names of people, places, and things that did not exist into a timeline when it did not exist, and then measuring their life experience by that.
Absolutely.
Or trying to analyze history by that. Not unlike in what we talked about earlier today, someone trying to argue rationally with facts and knowledge, or against facts and knowledge, wanting to have an intelligent conversation about Jesus's iPhone 10. Really, it's sort of like that. Taking things totally out of context and trying to justify it. And once you're able to get out of this tendency to allow people who are instructors taking contemporary things and placing them into a time of history where they do not belong, but to support a position that they're holding presently and teaching accordingly. Often, like say for instance, when you see scholars go into ancient Hikuta and ancient Yucatan, etc., history, and then start talking about black people and brown people when all of that is contemporary stuff started by Europeans who occupied America, having nothing to do with the natural people of the land whatsoever, all coming from brand systems to separate the people from the land so the European can claim the land and claim them because these are names that they made up. And so they're really copyrighted sociological terms. And then when the people claim these terms, then the European claim the people under the straw of the 14th Amendment. And then people want to argue the history and then take these contemporary terms that are tags, disinheriting tags, and then put them in history, and very often in so-called books, like referencing the black gods of Egypt type stuff like that, when that is a total fraud, absolute total fraud. And yet they've gotten away with it in the name of scholarship, and has actually messed up the minds of many generations and children who actually think these things were identities and use them, and not knowing that they are abandoning their estates and also abandoning their right of claim under treaty and constitution, because no such people made any such treaty or built any such anything, because no such people ever existed. No different than Santa Claus never existed, and he didn't buy you that bike. I don't care how many letters you ever mailed to him. That type of stuff. But yet we know that people, spend billions of notes to celebrate these things. Give the brother Mike in the back, please.
Islam, Grand Chief.
Islam, good brother.
Question I have dovetails the conversation, which is gaining access to truth. There is besides what we're currently discussing, a video that I saw on YouTube where a Palestinian Canadian brother speaks about knowing that the Al-Maghreb Al-Aqsa is known to be the North Gate.
Yes.
And what occurred to me kind of aligns with what I hear in terms of the narrative of CM Bay, which is had to go to another country to gain access to the education there.
Yeah.
To gain access to knowledge.
Yes.
So what I've been trying to do is to find those university textbooks in Spain or another country that would also then speak to what we're not being taught here.
Yes. Now, let me give you, hold it for just in case you're, expanding on that. Now, a few years back, Dr. Ben Yakinen, I did a thing in Brooklyn. We were raising finance from this before he passed, and they had a big convention thing up there, and we were raising finance for Dr. Ben. He was in a wheelchair, and they gave me awards, a bunch of awards for doing work, whatever, over the years and stuff like that. And I was talking to Dr. Ben, in the back, because we eventually brought him out. They had different speakers and stuff like that. And one of the things that Dr. Ben always emphasized, but you'll notice that a lot of people who study Dr. Ben will not emphasize. When Dr. Ben would talk about his experience, the negative experiences that he had getting his education and struggling, from a poor family, etc., and his education evolutionary development, he always stated, in harmony with what you just said, with all the schools and all the work that he's done and all the trials that he went through gaining his education, that the capstone of his education is when he finally went to the Moorish universities in Spain. And that was the capstone of his education. Now, keep in mind, his doctorate, Dr. Ben Yakinen's doctorate, was research and treatise and writings on Moorish history. And yet, most of the people that follow Dr. Ben keep talking about black history. Do you understand? When they're boasting about Dr. Ben, they keep saying black people. And yet his dissertation was on Moorish history. His degree was based, because it is the Asiatic African peoples who are Moors, collectively. And it's no secret to any scholar. However, what it has done by people allowing scholars to continue the Christian black brand systems of black people, brown people, green people, don't matter what color you are type thing, they've actually contaminated people's mentality about their own selves and has actually disconnected the people from their estate in the name of scholarship. When in fact it is not only corruptively wrong, it is a violent intellectual and literary attack that has not been called. Absolutely that. So I just wanted to interject that to you, because not only did he speak about that, but I've talked to him personally, so because I have to help raise finance, for a lot of his medical care, and this is the other deal. You have a lot of well-known scholars that have produced a lot for the world, and yet they keep going to the grave poor and dead, dying poor and stuff like that. And people having to raise finance for their funerals and stuff. This stuff is disgraceful. Go ahead, Tamara. Give me the mic.
Just to back off what the brother was just talking about with connecting the educational information in the textbook. Now, would the Rockefeller have something to do with the distortion across the globe?
1901.
1908?
1901.
01? Okay.
What, the education board?
Yes, the Rockefeller. Now, would that have...
yeah, that's 1902. As a matter of fact, since you're discussing that, why don't you pull this up and you go ahead and read that off and share with us your view, right?
Yeah, Rockefeller.
Oh, and there's also the, I think I'm thinking of also the general semantics movement, where there was
exactly.
the 1938 general semantics movement, which was put in place to change the language from a connotative from a denotative to a connotative language. So
scroll this down, and if when you get to the philosophy, read that, because I think it'll be more effective for the people. Read that, and then turn the light down just a minute. Yep. And then continue what you're saying, because it'll support exactly what you're sharing with us right now. Go down. This is the General Education Board. You can read this if you choose to, but you can even look at the way the finance was dispensed. That was by design, but put particular emphasis on the philosophy section. Go ahead, Tamara.
Okay, General Education Board, creators / founders. John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates in the year 1902. The General Education Board was a philanthropic which was used primarily to support higher education in medical schools in the United States and to help rule white and black schools in the South, as well as modernize farming practices in the South. It helped eradicate hookworm and created the county agent system in American agriculture, linking research at state agricultural experiment stations with actual practices in the field. The General Education Board was created by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates in 1902. Rockefeller gave $180 million. Its head, Frederick Gates, envisioned the country school of tomorrow, wherein young and old will be taught in practical ways how to make rural life beautiful, intelligent, fruitful, recreative, helpful, and joyous. By 1934, the General Education Board was making grants of $5.4 million a year. The General Education Board spent nearly all of its money by the year 1950 and closed in the year 1964.
Let's go
Keep
down.
going.
Now just go to the philosophy page.
Philosophy. Program.
Now right
Here we
there,
go.
and then read that, and then go right back to where you were sharing with us, and we'll see how it correlates. Go ahead.
Okay, philosophy. Founders of the General Education Board, John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates, 1902. In our dreams, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present education conventions fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We should not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. We should not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is very simple as well as a very beautiful one, to train these people as we find them to a perfectly idle life just where they are. So we will organize our children and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way in the homes, in the shops, and on the farm.
Right in their philosophy page, they're telling you that they're going to dumb the children down.
Yep.
Now you can see why the children in targeted communities cannot compete. Then when you study this, you'll understand why when our illustrious prophet Noah set up the old Canaanite temple, part of the operations of the charter is that every temple must have a school. And the prophet said and commanded that our own press, and he set up the press, he had two presses, the Morse guide being one, I think the monitor was the other, and he maintained that those were the most powerful weapons in the hand of our group. And of course, I don't have to tell you the history of the infiltration, and persons who should have been supporting it tore all of that stuff down, and people have still been running these temples to the day, unfortunately, and have not been charged with that breach. But again, then the people are sending their children to the Europeans in the school system and then complaining about them not being educated, and yet these same people have never read the philosophy page, which is available to anybody, where they say what they're going to do to your children.
Right.
And they don't even hide it.
Yep.
And why should they hide it when these people don't read, can't read, and always dealing with beliefs instead of facts? And when you give them the facts, they want to argue with you about, well, we're only dealing with religion. The prophet didn't bring that. And this is what you keep seeing them say. And then sacrificing the next generation. It is our job to avoid that closed-minded, destructive, expropriatorious mentality. Hiding behind the prophet and actually suppressing his real missionary work of enforcing Constitution law and actually educating the people. And I again say, if you kill the naivety among the people themselves will dismantle the corruption and the misinformation. And this is again why the prophet said the day will come, in reference to the traitors that was in the movement. He said they may slow me down, but they will not stop me. They can't stop me. And he said the time will come, day will come when Moors will come into this movement with their eyes already open, and we'll move them old Moors to the back of the room. What it really means is they're going to get rid of them traitors. And they're going to carry out his law. Because these people are telling people that Joel didn't teach law and civics, when that's the heart of the movement. Because you cannot protect the birthright and you cannot claim the estate when you don't know law. And you definitely cannot take your places amongst the affairs of men when you don't know international law principles or constitutional enforcement. You'd be totally incompetent, which of course has been the state Again, it's important to know, and so you see the relationship of the operations of the National Lawyers Guild and why I chose that as a subject. Now, when you look at that, also look at the Crown-owned U.S. article. But anyway, go back and give us support to what you were telling us earlier, and you see the correlation in this operation to support what you're saying. Go ahead, Tamara.
Basically, I was camelbacking out the gentleman when he had raised question about how to obtain true knowledge in the educational system in maybe another country. Maybe you said in another area. What's another area?
Other countries.
Other countries. Okay.
Yes.
In other countries, and
As an interjection, you keep your thought. This is one of the reasons why such effort has been continuously made under the Spanish Inquisition for the United States military operation to have a military base in all the countries to maintain control of the leadership so that the real history is not told and the real politics is not told. This is the reason why usually the real politics are told in conversations like this.
Yeah.
As an example, when I was teaching in New York, in Harlem, some of my experiences have been, people flying in from Palestine directly and taking information back to Palestine and giving me support. A note from the ambassador of Ecuador, including 2 emissaries that came to visit me in New York, two men and a woman, and also giving me the direct personal card of the diplomat at the consulate for me to call it in case I ever came down there for support and stuff like that, and also encouraging me to continue to do what I'm doing, letting me know that outside people are paying attention, because a lot of the work that we've been doing over the years, the attack and the criticism has been from actually Grand Sheiks in the Moorish Science Temple who should have been doing this work generations ago. Many of them have been my major attackers.
Dirty Moors.
And actually I've been getting support from actually diplomats and people from other countries, including Liberia, Palestine, Honduras, Ecuador, Borican, Dominica, Haiti, Mexico, so to encourage me, because they know that these traitors have been pretty much infiltrating the temples. But people here don't know that, because they most of them deal from an emotional bias point of view. They think that what these people have been saying is what the temples are. The temples have been misrepresented. Doesn't mean the people in the temples are bad. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The administrators have been extremely corrupt, and they have never been called on it. And Moors have been cheated out of a lot of information, because a lot of things that Moorish Americans in the temples should have been told that Moorish Americans have been suffering under the Christian black codes should not be taking place today, because those things should have been in place. As an example, James, and we discussed this before, and this is redundant too. During the time when Dwight D. Eisenhower, the German Dutchman, closed down consular court. That is actually Article 3 court. So I think a lot of times when people talk about, the abrogation of the gold clause to the Constitution, a lot of emphasis is put on that whenever someone's talking about the straw man, there's no real money. You hear that kind of statement, we're talking about the gold and silver coin by constitutional law, and so the Federal Reserve and its operatives under the Jesuit order, and the Templars of the Circle Church on Fleet Street, how they've been fleecing the people under the Bar Association for years, etc., and stealing the people's resources, which has actually come to crescendo right now. You will not see so much emphasis put on the breach or the abrogation of Article 3, Section 2, diversity of nationality, which is a more severe even than the gold clause issue. So you will see so much issue dealing with Article 1, Section 10, and very little emphasis put on Article 3, the judicial branch of government, which was actually breached by the members of the Knights Templars through the Circle Church under the Secret Treaty of Verona to actually neutralize any what you would call curative platform by law by which descendants of the Moors, branded Negro, Black, and colored, would have any justifiable venue for which any controversy should by law be heard, meaning that having any remedy or recourse, which is Article 3 court, which is why you will not see them making reference to diversity of nationality, which of course is a consular venue, Article 3 of the judicial system. And so I suggest and present to you the argument that the same way that the breach argument of the abrogation of the gold clause has been emphasized strongly, that the same thing should be done with the diversity breach or abrogation with Article 3, Section 2 of the courts system. And as you already know, one of the missionary works of the Knights Templars, Kaiplos Ku Klux Klan operations was to deny the descendants of the Moors any due process in law. And so when you study that and you look at the abrogation of Article 3, Section 2, diversity of nationality, which is a counter move to you having a nationality card, meaning that you have a nationality card and no lawful platform. So, James, and this is back to the breach of fiduciary duties. When Eisenhower shut down the consular courts, Article 3, in 1956, the sheiks and the grand sheiks and the moderator and the chairman of the Moorish Science Temple of America were supposed to step up and enforce the law. That was their cue. Now, someone who doesn't know law or history, that isn't obvious to them. It never even dawns on them to make that relationship. But somebody who knows law, history, and constitutional principles sees it immediately. You know, no different than, you know, like say, my family's barbers, right? And just like you deal with different textures of hair, different types of hair and stuff like that. Like you'll deal with, one of the shops that was across the street from one of the shops I used to work at, Nellie's Beauty Salon. They used to send some women over to get their hair cut at the shop, and then they go back and get their hair done over the beauty parlor. Because some of the beauticians can do hair, but they can't cut hair. If you know how that works, type thing. So you deal with skills. And also I used to do professionally body work. You know, I could cut 2 cars in half, make a car, finish it, and you never know there was 2 cars. You understand? Now, when you're, as an example, when you're painting, if you deal with, say, too much moisture in your tank and you haven't cleared the moisture out of the tank, you get sometimes what is called orange peel. Orange peel, and it being different gradients. And where someone who understands paint and finishes will pick it up immediately, somebody who doesn't know that, oh man, that thing look good, you know, because their eye, you look at things differently. You know what I mean? Or even like when you're looking down a panel, you'll see flaws where the average person don't see flaws. Same thing if you're doing, like if we're doing walls, you know, just like if we're doing compounding walls, same principle. Your eye will see things that, even though people will see things, you can see deeper into imperfections if you're trained in certain things. Likewise, in social engineering, the social engineering recognizes subtleties in people's language and choice of words and structure of words and certain things they lean on as reference points in history, and it's almost like an immediate measurement of where they are, knowing certain landmark things that were taught to them, and then knowing some of the real history. And so, as an example, and I'm only saying that to say this, the reason I use those examples to say this, like say if you have if a European was up here, a Kaikos Ku Klux Klan, right? A Grand Dragon, say a Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan. And then you have a Grand Chief, the Moorish Science Temple of America, right? In the public, we look at them as conflicting orders. Now, but what do they really know about each other? The Grand Sheik knows that Grand Dragon has a Koran. Yep. He got a Koran, but they got a Koran. The Grand Sheik knows on his degrees that European, that Grand Dragon, in secret, got Moorish fezzes. Yep. And the same J. Edgar Hoover that set up COINTELPRO to infiltrate all so-called black organizations to undermine them, and secretly go to a lodge with a Moorish name, got Moorish fez dressed in with a Moorish name on it and stuff like that, because they're ruling in Morocco over Moors that don't even know they're Moors. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Who have the CIA that belongs to the Jesuit order of the Circle Church got a 6-point budget, and one of those budgets of the 6 points is just to pay off so-called black leaders to keep that black thing going in the communities, and our people don't even know it. That these people, in the name of black scholarship, that are promoting this black Negro thing, are paid to do that. And they know that these people are Moors. And most of them are 32-degree Masons, got a Moorish fez, and go to a lodge with a Moorish name, and they all named after Moorish women. I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? And yet, the masses who follow them and pay their tithes don't even know that these guys in secret know that these people are Moors and ain't black. Yep. Just like that European. And they mad at the European not knowing that their so-called black leader is a COINTELPRO operative. I'm just saying subtle things like that. So where a social engineer recognizes that immediately, even if they don't speak up, meaning that they know it immediately. Whereas a person who does not study or have a background, they may have an opinion or they may feel a little uncomfortable, but they don't necessarily know that. Whereas a sociologist, it's just like anything else, you just know it. Just like if you're in engineering, like say, if you're a mechanic, and you're a mechanic, right? Sometimes you have some mechanics are a little bit more astute than others. But fundamentally, a general mechanic in good, you pull a car in and you not pick up all those things. That's what I'm saying to you. And so I'm saying that to say this. When you're dealing with, say, imams, right? Grand Sheiks, assistant Grand Sheiks, Sheikesses of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Knights Templars, Knights of Columbus, Kaiklos Ku Klux Klan, Daughters of the American Revolution, Shriners, Daughters of ISIS, Eastern Stars, all of these people get those degrees based on a certain amount of proven and testable accumulated information that earns them the degree that gets that title. They don't just get that title, although some are by nepotism. You don't just get them titles, meaning that when people, I think a lot of times when people, say, go to the Moorish Science Temple of America and say Grand Chief, because of the nepotism that's been going on, a lot of those people are assigned and are not qualified. But generally, if they got that title, they're a PhD. Now, so if a Klanner is standing here, if a Grand Dragon is standing here, and I'm a Grand Chief, I already know that he knows. That's not what I'm saying. In other words, you may have a different agenda, but the foundational knowledge that requires those degrees are relative across the board. Or do you understand what I'm saying to you? So, whereas a Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple of America, or Sheikus of the Moorish Science Temple's missionary work is to enforce the Constitution, right? And to teach the people the truth about their nationality and their birthright and their lost estate. Are we clear? Now, Clanner's missionary work is to enforce the Constitution and to protect the women and children from the skullduggery and the abuses that have been taking place. Are we clear? So, a grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan's missionary work is to enforce the Constitution for the United States. Grand Sheik of the Moorish Science Temple's missionary work is to enforce that Constitution of the United States. To the view of the general public, they look at them as being extremely opposites. However, on another hand, the grand dragon of the Moorish Science circle, Kaiklos, Ku Klux Klan, missionary work is to do such things to keep the Moors from getting back into power. Are we clear? So there's a political agenda, but nevertheless, the knowledge base is still there, meaning they're not absent of the real knowledge. That's the point that I'm making to you. So when you're dealing with people with degrees or PhDs or doctors of philosophy, so if I'm talking to a grand dragon of the Ku Klux Klan here in the public, they may put up a front or a show. But in private, y'all ain't around, he buy me coffee.
Of course.
Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Mm-hmm. Now, we can have an attitude if we want to play like that, but that ain't really how kind of things work in the real world. You know, Europeans don't necessarily dislike Moors. They don't like niggers.
Right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? They don't like phony people who keep trying to be somebody they're not and always want to get in somebody else's party and screw up their women all the time. That's the real deal with them. You know, so our people think that they don't like us as a people, and it's not there's a political angle for them to keep their power base, if you get the point. But in fact, some of the things that are actually done has been more to protect their power base than it is an issue of disliking us. But they don't like niggers because they know niggers are ignorant. Because that's a brand they gave to Moors who are extremely ignorant. They just think it's an identity. You know, what it means is monkeys. You know, but they can't read, so they think it's African identity, which again makes them disgraceful, not only to themselves, but to the civilized world. And then the European uses that as a justification for his mistreatment, because they're outside the human family. It's sort of like giving them brands that take them outside of the human family, then abusing them because they practice black culture that's outside the human family. But yet they want the benefit of national law protections while they don't respect nationality. It's an interesting dynamics. But the point, and I'm going to say this and go ahead and make this statement. The deal that I'm making, and the presentment that I'm making, and the reason why I went on that spiel is to say to you, don't assume that people with degrees don't know this information just because they don't talk about it in public. Don't think that Europeans don't know this information just because they're not promoting it. Don't think that Grand Sheiks and Sheikesses of the Moorish Science Temple don't know this information just because they don't talk about it. When people don't talk about these things to the general masses, is because it's not in their political interest or agenda to do so, because they don't desire for the people to be raised up. Which means they're more operating on an agenda where they got their hands in the people's pocket. And they don't want them to get so much information, because it will take their hands out, the parasites out of their pocket, whether they're preachers or politicians, both of which are parasites. Are we clear? Now, all scholars know this. This is what all scholars, I'm saying this to you, and then pick up, James. All scholars really know, truthfully, that preachers and politicians are both parasite platforms of con artists, thieves, and misrepresenters that hide behind fake history, color of law, color of authority, and hide behind the names of the different prophets. Whatever name they use is profitable for them under the guise of spirituality. All scholars know this. However, you know and I know most of them will not admit or talk about these things in public. They will act like these people are spiritual people that love Jesus, God, and Allah and all that stuff. And they're really parasites. Absolute parasites. Which is, again, why they will not have you study, like, say, for instance, like as a sheik, as a grand sheik. And also, you know, understanding ministry, period, and knowing anyone that has an LLD. To study religion, you have to study the origin of religion. And Lodge is going to take you back to the Yucatan and Hikupta, what the people call Egypt. And all of your major religions have one common root. All of your major religions. However, when it evolves, then they get into secularisms that was created by the priesthood themselves to divide the people against each other and for them to claim different territories and different so territories and jurisdictions is not necessarily just lands, but would be groups of people. Like, say, for instance, if you're say Muslims, right? That would be a territorial jurisdiction, although you're mixed into the community. Say you're a Christian Baptist or Methodist, Episcopalian, right? Lutheran, you know, like that. Those would be among the priesthood territories. And they have agreements, secret agreements, that they don't breach in each other's territory. And everybody's talking about it's only one God, but just don't go to the one across the street. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's the game they play. They're con artists. You know, they really are. Now, and so the deal of it is, the point that I'm making to you all is when you get into your PhDs or those who have these degrees, one of the things that really is part of the degrees that most of them never reveal to their believers is that you lose your naivety to all of this BS, and you know that it's BS. Now, you either decide to be honorable and start telling the people the truth, and there's not too much money in that. Or you pick one of the clubs, start dividing the people against each other, and throw the devil around as always a tool, and start taking their finance. Acting like, you know, you're a collection agent for Jesus, or you're collecting Muhammad's charities for Allah, and stuff like that, you know. And people get all teary-eyed and start giving you their mortgage money and stuff like that. And the house that should have went to the grandchildren from grandmom, they gave to Reverend Pigfoot Parasite. And, you know, Bertha was singing the choir, get that, got that. And your children is struggling at McDonald's trying to pay rent when they should have had an inheritance from grandmom. And they think they gave it to Jesus. You know, these people are parasites. However, in truth, they know this information. And 90% of all you Christian ministers are 32-degree Masons. And the matrons of them churches are Eastern Stars. And in secret got Korans, got the 4 Vedas, got Uwasti, got the Bhagavad Gita, got Korans, got all the books, and then take one book, whatever club they're in, and that's the one they promote, and act like, you know, this is the only book, and if you don't do this book, you're not going to heaven, and you get no peanut butter sandwiches after 5 o'clock, and everybody gets all scared and stuff like that, and so all these people that are supposed to be loving each other and godly hate each other. They can be in the same religion in a different sect, and they hate. Even family members can't even daggone talk without arguing. The priests did that. In secret, they don't believe none of that crap they did in feeding the people. And that's my point to you. And I know it's hard for a lot of people to accept, you know, but what I've discovered over the years in private conversations, whether you're talking to so-called Christian ministers or Hebrew Israelites, so-called Jews, etc., in private conversation, when you really talking the real history, they will not only not disagree, they'll add to the conversation. Yep. And then when you get out to the public, they'll always come with this, oh, they're not ready for that. Mm-hmm. you right, but it's always that but comes in, and then they'll give the party line. And the party line will be whatever their denomination is, not the truth, whatever their denomination is. And that's how the masses are controlled sociologically by the politicians and the priesthood parasite platform, who in secret all got degrees and all know the truth. That's the point that I'm making to you. And so, so a lot of times some of the things that we may speak of that appear to be controversial, just because we're talking about it, don't think that these people don't know. They just ain't going to talk, because that takes their hands out your pockets. You know what I mean? Because they're not in the business of liberating anybody or any spiritual development. They're in the business of hiding behind Jesus, hiding behind Allah, hiding behind Prophet Muhammad, hiding behind Buddha, to take the widow's pennies. The same argument that Jesus argued. They're in the business of stealing the widow's pennies. That's what they're in the business of. They ain't in the business of spirituality or nothing divine, period, except dressing in $2,000 suits at the expense of the widow's pennies that they've been stealing, lying, saying that Jesus got a bank account at Chase Manhattan. Now, excuse the spiel. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I was just going to drop a bomb. This is going to take you out a little bit. The area I grew up with is basically Chester County. My car work going up to Lancaster, so Caucasian means dead corpse. We're having a conversation at a body shop, so we're talking about his truck, my Bronco. And he's just going, yeah, well, I'm getting this fixed and I'm getting that fixed. I said, well, that's interesting. I said, aren't you black people? He goes, yeah, I know. They know they're black people. And I know the conversation with a guy running for office. Oh, I went to this college and that college. He goes, the black people are, I said, wait a minute, black people? I said, you're the black people. He goes, yeah, I know. They know they're the black people. You're not black people. The European knows. They're taught that from a child. But they're not going to tell you. So these kind of forms that we're in now can explain that to you, tell your children. You're white people. Eddie Murphy, Dan Aykroyd, changing places. They flip the script. They take your nationality. This is a good forum here for you to understand. But I played with the Europeans. I grew up with them, but I played with them. Because I know I'm skilled enough to play the game when, just to find out, things like I just told you. And they come right out and say it. We know we're black people. Our people run around being, you go back to color. They have no respect for you. That's why the cops beat you up. Because you don't even have a nationality to live your life. They're stateless people. So they beat you up and shoot you the way you want. No, I don't know why they're doing this. That's why. Black Lives Matter, George Soros, Ashkenazi, and not Jews. He's the one that runs it. But you got our people in the front line, and you got the European in the back line. So the first ones to get the shot are our people. Where did that happen? The shot heard around the world, where they first started the Revolutionary War. The first person was killed was a Moor. Same thing today. Stay out of that stuff. Don't get in that. It's a trick.
Yes.
Grand Sheik question. Sorry, I'm not really changing the subject. The gentleman in
It's always on subject.
Yeah,
if it's human development and our affairs, you're always on subject.
All right. All right, I got two-part question. First part, the gentleman in the back was discussing, about education and looking for books in other places, other countries. They recognize, today about the great book burnings and things of that nature.
They would be referred to, for the record, what's referred to as the great Christian book burnings is the expurgatorious policies of Unum Sanctum. That would be Indexus Librorum Prohibitorum and Indexus Librorum Expurgatorius. And this is where the pattern where they do, upon which they did what they call a period of reconstruction. where they hide literature, where they, as Tamara was saying earlier, and they do this to this very day, and they have yearly conferences on connotative linguistic interjection by social engineering into targeted communities. We're the major target. And this is where another system, and keep your train of thought, where like if you go into a dictionary, the more modern the dictionary, the more that the true etymology will be pushed down, like when you have what is called linear entry, as an example, like say you go to a dictionary, whereas in your earlier dictionary, you gotta look at words or meanings like this. A mother, because everything is based on the planet, on the matriarchy, on woman. Because woman is the gateway to males and females. And where people will talk against that politically, the same people who talk against that politically got a belly button. The only proof they got of their origin, they ain't got no proof of no gods that they talk about, they ain't got no proof of nothing. The only proof they really got is that belly button. That's it. Right. Now, everything else they talk about is speculative. Meaning we can speculate on creative, well, the creator gave me a sandwich on Thursday, and your mom gave you a breast. You can prove that. And you got a belly button, which is your only birthmark. It ain't no daggone birth certificate. It ain't that hairy bump on the back of your neck and stuff. It's your belly button. Now that's proof. Now, point. Everything is based on matriarchy. Government is based on matriarchy. The politics denies it. That's Inquisition operations. So there's a conflict of thought based on what actually takes place in nature and what is promoted politically. Take that in consideration when you formulate your ideas around any of the politics. And then the connotative linguistics that you make reference to, the etymology. What a word is in its meaning always is. In other words, the mother's child is always that mother's child. Now, when you deal with connotations, start looking at adopted children or somebody that she's babysitting. When it comes to absolute truth, you got to name the child. When you're doing linguistic or research into writers, you always go to the etymology. What the Europeans keep doing in the expurgatorius principle is dropping the etymon lower and lower, and the first entries become in the minds of the people the meanings. 90% of it is connotative. And the denotation is not only always pushed down, it's usually reduced or heavily edited, and then you have to do what you call the etymological brackets and then go into the appendix and other books later to even trace down the real meanings. And so this is why they confidently have said concerning us, this is harmonic with, the philosophy report on the General Education Board, why the Europeans say confidently and with truth that monkeys can't read. They'll say, don't worry about them niggers, because they can't damn read. And they only deal with beliefs that we've trained them with by our operatives, which are them civil rights Negro leaders that they promoted since around 1954, 55, 56, as a political platform after Eisenhower abrogated the Article 3 courts of diversity. You could put that in context. Then go ahead.
But so with all that, why wouldn't it just be simpler for them, since they got all the toys, all the weapons, all the power in that sense? Why wouldn't it just be simple for them to say, seeing how this is a computer age now, and even though it's not easy sometimes to get information, but you can eventually, it's going to get leaked out somewhere. Why don't they just say, okay, you guys did once rule, you was the first people on the planet, but you're not now, we got all the weapons, what you going to do about it?
Well, they say that. They do. In conversation.
They do, but they don't. I mean, you spend a lot of time trying to hide information when you should just say what it is.
Now look at this. Look at this. This is what you must understand. Since when does a vampire want to kill the cow?
Right. Can't talk.
They want the cow to stay weak,
Well, that's true.
docile, moldable in their hands, but they don't want to kill their food. Hold on. Hold
I'm
on.
not saying that, I'm waiting.
Now, this is a rule. A colonist can occupy a land for generations. That does not make it their land. Just because the heirs of an estate don't know their heirs, don't stop them from being heirs. Key. The European, as Jurali has been saying, have living off your virtues, which means he needs the host. If he could and get away with it, he would have eliminated us a long time ago. However, what he does what is called population control, the eugenics program. As an example,
Right.
like say these young sisters, right? Your young sisters. If they don't really know the politics, they may go to hospitals and clinics on a regular basis just for checkups and stuff and never suspect that a eugenics program is ongoing and they're in danger as soon as they walk in that damn door.
Right.
That's correct. Eugenics, yep.
They are giving them cancer viruses,
Yep.
which is a biological warfare thing. All these cancers all over the place don't exist in nature.
Yep. High blood pressure.
They are military biological warfare through the food right across the plate.
Yep.
And giving them directly in injections.
Yep.
The same way they take them and put that bond on the children with a birth certificate, and the women be thinking that that's a birth record when it's a bank bond that belongs to the Jesuit and the Circle Church.
Yep.
Regulated from England
Yep.
and from the Vatican. And then the Reverend is telling them that the marriage licenses and all this kind of stuff, Islam, are beautiful records of God, for the divine birth of the children, christening. That's an offering, that's an offering of the children to the God of this world, who's the Pope of Rome, including the eggs in the womb, including all of the inheritances and stuff like that. Now, the point that I'm making is this. People who really don't know the history and the sociology will first think that some of these statements we're making is our opinion. Once they start doing the research, they'll find these are facts. Once they start getting the facts, they will lose faith. Now, keep this in mind. Keep this in mind, because that's what's running with things here. And so, again, faith and fiat are relative. As an example, now you notice how much emphasis is always put on this word in this society? And what do people usually associate with this word? Oh, this is so spiritual, my personal relationship with Jesus. Their knees get weak and stuff, and they get themselves together, and and they'll do the holy roly thing, start waving and stuff like this, start hallelujah to you stuff, right? And so they relate this word to divinity in the nature of, right? However, the ones who are promoting it are really promoting this. It's an engineering tool, right? Blind faith, not faith, in the sense that they've been taking it, right? Now, and so upon this, they build this. And from that, they build this. Excuse my scribble, y'all. So they see this stuff totally different than you see this stuff. Are we clear? However, once you're aware of this, you lose your naivety. And you don't let some man deceive you by coming to you with them blind faith platforms in the name of Jesus, God, Allah, Moses, Muhammad, or any of the prophets, knowing that they are con artists. It doesn't mean that everyone is deliberately lying. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because some people come in, say, the churches and the mosques and really are doing good work, truthfully, if you get the point. It's only a handful, though. The majority of them are just simply out and out con artists. Are we clear? And they use this as a front to get people to put their guard down. But the people and social engineer knows all of this is really behind it. Whereas the person who's naive, they only see this and they relate this in their mind because they've been trained from childhood, God in heaven. This is why the world is so corrupted, because this is really what's been going on. Not really spiritual development. It's really been all of this stuff. And now, back to your statement and your concern. When the people lose faith in the organized institutions that have actually been there and are there to enslave them, and to create and to maintain and to administer and to manage peonage and European colonial operations exploitations, necessitated by ignorance among the people, maintained a dissolution of families, which is maintained, which they refer to as shooting situations instead of bullets. If and when the people lose faith in the institutions, the fiat systems constructed under the blind faith, which is the bulwark of these, which means these have no strength if this is not in the minds of the people. If you remove that, the fiat system collapses. Because it's all based in blind faith. However, the people in general, having limited information, usually will maintain a connection to the blind faith systems because they're afraid to think for themselves by training. Critical thinking creates fear in them because they're stepping out of the box. They're out of the pasture. They think that they're subject to the wolves, not knowing that the shepherd is a wolf. Little Red Riding Hood type thing. Because it's really telling you what it really is. But so their faith is actually in the wolves and the vampires who are dressed in black robes. They don't even hide it. Dracula thing. Turn on the fan and the cape goes away. Whoa, man. Dangerous, So they tell you in order to avoid Because they're conscious that divine law recognizes no person or station. So again, like Tamara was saying earlier, what do the Cretans do? What is one of the things that is commonly done and people don't suspect it, that is actually a karmic shield response? They'll make movies and show you that the vampire's coffin is either in the basement of the church or in the steeple of the church. What are they really telling you? That's where the vampires are. You know, but it's in the movie, so you never suspected. But who's the vampire? That guy standing behind the pool pit. See, so from a karmic perspective, he's told you. So it's kind of like when you start charging, well, man, you know, I didn't mean to take potatoes, but the devil made you do it. And then the devil says, it's kind of, you ain't got that kind of right. See, because like this is, I'm only called. You follow. So you can come off that. You know, and so it's sort of like that. A karmic thing where people keep trying to remove their responsibility to do divinely what they know in their heart is correct. And you don't need to go to a church, mosque, or synagogue to know what's right. You know it by nature. It's in your DNA. Your mama gave it to you in your DNA. So don't try to act like the mosque made you holy roly or the temple made you holy roly. These are just hospitals where people who don't know how to act right. You know, give them some kind of moral re-instruction that they know in their heart. They already know what's right. You know, pretending, oh, I learned this. No, they already know what's right. But the point that I'm making to you, once people lose their allegiance to the blind faith that they have in the institutions, the power of the institution dies. Why? Because they're an illusion. And the illusion is predicated on the people's blind faith. However, not having other source or primal knowledge, they fear to venture into free thinking. They fear to respect their divine creative knowledge that's given to them divinely. They already got it. So they're always looking outside for the mystery God when the God is within, always has been, by your mother. And so everything that is in nature already given to you, we learn to disrespect and to minimize and keep looking for Rome to give us an education when actually he's giving you a modification of social engineering because you're under occupation. So if you kill the blind faith, you kill color of law, you kill color of right, you kill currency, because you know currency is actually them studying the human as an electrical, biological machine, which actually we absolutely are. And so, so they deal with the math. And so what they do, that's why it's called currency. And currency is not money. It's based on electrical studies of mechanical engineering applied to social order construction, knowingly. Now, as long as the target doesn't understand that, the target thinks they got money. They're not allowed to handle money. But they're trained that they have money. They got private commercial papers that belongs to the Jesuits that's controlled from Fleet Street, England, under the secret treaty of Verona, of the Knights Templars, of the Circle Church, of the bankers and the lawyers who really make up the crown, etc., which is again why we picked that subject tonight, of the National Lawyers Guild. You know, so once you start killing the naivety that you know exists with our people, by virtue of really informing them on what really is, they will, it's kind of hard because it's ugly, but, you know, they can't go to the prom and act like that mole with that hair on their nose. Is, you know, you can disguise it by putting an earring in it if you want to. It's better if you just laser it off, you know what I mean, stuff like that. You know, or go to the prom with a Nike high heels, one's an Adidas, and you think you sharp, and everybody else is laughing. You think they're admiring you. You know, it's sort of like us. In our ignorance, we be thinking that the world is admiring us because we're saying we're believers, and they're looking at you as a lunchbox, and for the first opportunity to take advantage of your ignorance, and then we want to call it prejudice, when really they're taking advantage of people who've been socially engineered, that don't know fundamental geography, don't know fundamental birthright issues, do not know fundamental government, do not know fundamental constitutional principles that are the supreme law of the land, and keep looking at foreign Europeans of the Bar Association who are actually members of the Circle Church for remedies for the injuries that are happening to them that originate with the very Bar Association members who they don't know are members of the Circle Church of pledge to Fleet Street, England, under the secret treaty of Verona, and is the source of all your daggone legal problems. So when the naivety leaves you, the fiat dies. Let's look at this. Let's look at what is really the problem that the Europeans operating at North America are actually having with what they're calling the financial system. They can call it the reset, they can call it a lot of things. What's happened is that the world has lost faith and trust in their institutions and literally, factually, not buying U.S. corporation government debt, i.e. U.S. T-bonds. What it causes politically is what you call looping or return loop, where you can see the phoenix is eating his own tail. Now, so what's happening is that's the basis of their economics since the commercial mercenary war that they called the Civil War, when they created the T-bonds on the backs of the Moors who they branded Negro, black, colored, and Indians. That's the basis of their economics. It lives as long as the people have faith in it. When the people lose faith in it, it dies, and thus the electrical current that the vampires are sucking from your neck, it's invisible, but it's real. The straws start getting clogged up, and Vampy starts getting that persimmon stuff, and he's got trying to find new veins, and you ain't got nothing going on because the pruners are raising. And this is basically what's been happening. And so they can't kill the golden goose, so they got nothing. So a civil war is taking place amongst the corporate entities of the United States Corporation Company who are fighting each other for the spoils. Right. This is really what's going on between Trump, the Clintons, and the Bushes, and others in the background. While Russia and China is dumping them T-bonds, and China is using the debt instruments that the U.S. corporation has dumped on them for years to buy up 2/3 of Manhattan. And a third of Philadelphia. And all your major cities. So this is what's happening in the background. Now, people who really don't know the politics, who think they've been paying mortgages, they don't know nothing about the fact that this stuff is being discharged and set off by the corporate operatives and the bankers and the members of the Circle Church. And so they've been thinking that because they've been keeping up with what they think is payments on their mortgages, and they're wondering how the city's coming in and in blocks gentrifying communities. They're trading their estates. And they have no power to counter it. Why? Dwight D. Eisenhower abrogated Article 3, Section 2. And the Grand Chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple of America breached Act 1 and did not enforce that Constitution as charged by Noble Ali. And the Moors were left out just like rabbits in the field, and the Europeans have been stealing their estates. That's the real politics. And provable. Provable. So you have Europeans who are in breach of trust, fiduciary trust, in breach of administrative commercial trust, and the Grand Chiefs of the Moorish Divine National Movement, for the most part, are in breach of fiduciary trust and have not been charged. Now, if you love the prophet and the movement and your people, you'll tell that truth. If you are a fraud and going along the program, you will not say what Taji guy just now said. You would act like that's not the case. It's just I ain't gonna lie for them. You know, I like some because some of my boys and stuff, but I already know they're in breach. And I know a lot of them, you know, in private, you know, they talk to me, breach me, and hug me and all this stuff. And as soon as I leave, talk about me like a dog. Because they mad because I don't play with them. And I just tell it like it is, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But I do say this, if you don't tell the truth, you're not going to liberate these people. And if they don't get rid of their blind faith, they're done. And they're sacrificing the next generation. I say it is our duty and our responsibility to stop that pattern. Now, how do you stop that pattern? Not by an attitude, not being mad at anyone, just tell the truth. Like Drew Ali says, you all have the most powerful weapon in the world, the truth. All we got to do is start telling the truth. And it's uncomfortable, yes, because we're like that old dog that got comfortable laying on a bed of nails and howling and calling it spirituality. But we get bed sores now, and it's really getting acute. And so we're at a point where you can't fake it any longer, because you're going to die if you don't start dealing with this infection. And so the infection of the ignorance that exists amongst our people is going to have to be addressed, or they're going to be eliminated. They feel it, they sense it, but they don't exactly know where it's coming from. And they're also in denial. But they're now being forced to acknowledge that the wallpaper is not polka dot. It's just that the doo-doo has hit the fan, that went through the fan, and they got to stop acting like that's polka dot wallpaper and start getting real about life. And it's hard because they got to dump a lot of the blind faith that they've been living on. And this is with men and women and a lot of people who have been living their lives in belief systems that have never worked, never served them, cost them a fortune, and they're being forced to admit it, although they're still in denial. But the pressures that are being placed upon them are so great that uncomfortably they're going to be forced to admit it. They're either going to step up to the responsibility of enforcing that Constitution, like the prophet said in the divine warning, or pay the severe, extreme consequence for not having done so, which we're paying for already in droves, because they're just stealing people's estate. They're just bluntly out and out stealing people's estates.
Yep.
And so everything that the people have had faith in it to sense themselves into fake security, they do not have. And it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner where they can't fake it no more. Problem, Rome is trying to kill them off before they get to that point. And that's becoming more obvious too. So again, even to address your question, even though I went around, merry-go-round, I'm telling you the real politics. And so when the faith dies, that's what defeats the beast. You can't beat the beast with physical power. You can't beat the beast with, in his war machine. You beat the beast by denying your faith in his institutions. And when your blind faith is put to rest, his institutions will be put to rest. And so when you know the truth about how these things operate, it is that truth that will make you free. Not some finance, not some, let's march all over the place and make them understand that we somebody. They already know who you are. You the problem. You the one that didn't know who you are. Get over yourself. Get off your ego. And do what is necessary to inform others that have not known. And because you got a mountain to climb to deal with that, because they got all these mental blocks of their beliefs that have been their blind faith, that have never worked, but they've been protecting them. That's been their mental security blanket. But they still feel the cold. They got I say down in Arctic and stuff like this with their fur coat in the back, and they got their pajamas, they had 2 buttons in the back, and the buttons that broke off, and they still cold, the cheeks is out, and they, ain't caught on that, you better wrap that blanket all the way around type thing, and so, we're in a situation where our people are in a situation that their keisters are out, and they're going to be forced to admit it. They are in denial, and I'm not condemning them for it. I'm just identifying the situation. But when them chiefs, I say when they start getting frostbite, and one of them falls off and they hear, porcelain break on the ground, your whole dish, half-assed ain't too fun. They're not going to be able to deny this anymore.
That's right.
Go ahead, go brother. You want to interject something?
Oh,
You want to ask a question?
well, no, I'll say,
Islam.
So for the crown, I found it interesting. I was looking up coroner.
Yeah.
And coroner, Black's Law 5th edition, public official of English origin charged with duty to make inquiry into the causes and circumstances of any death which occurs through violence or suddenly and with marks of suspicion, i.e. unnatural death. And I did a little further research and found that coroners are protectors of private property for the crown.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, let's look at this. Hold this for a minute. There. And whenever you're talking death, and of course being Moorish American, you have the advantage because you know about civil little mortus. And so in law, you don't have to be physically dead to be declared dead. And so whereas the Europeans have been using the Christian black codes under civil little mortus for generations, stealing our estates, and it is known by leaders, politicians, preachers, and members, but they never tell it to the parishioners how the Europeans are really stealing their lands that that was in their family, that should have been coming down to them, and how these people are poor, and then they don't get why in all of their affairs the probate office always interjects themselves, and that all the foreclosures come under chancery court. And then at the same time, and look at this, and this is very interesting, and we'll discuss this in the future too, Jim, and this is also with some of the liens that are being placed on them, which you all know about. The enforcement of Article 3 or the Constitution disallows them to continue the ex parte actions that they've been doing to steal people's property and deny any what you call legitimate court action. And you'll see that letters and Form 92s for foreclosures that they've been doing in our neighborhoods have actually been coming from law offices, not from actual courts.
Yep.
Now, this is again the bulwark that we're talking about, and because y'all weren't here earlier, and why I chose the National Lawyers Guild and did the House Committee Report of 1950, and really understanding the Democratic Party is really Ku Klux Klan. And yet our people keep on voting as Democrats to their own demise, thinking that it serves them. Not that the Republican Party is operative, because they're both two sides of the same coin. Yeah. But the deal of it is, the ignorance of our people is so extreme, and they defend their ignorance. So this is again why it's important to actually dig up records and documents and share it with them. And for the few who will have any respect for any level of intelligence will start looking at things for what they actually are and kind of get over themselves and begin to admit the ugly and start actually working from their divine mind to start helping cure things for humanity. and get out of their egos and stop protecting the images of their belief system organizations that have actually been put in place to keep them in that docile state of mind. And when they lose that blind faith, the bankers and the lawyers lose their platform, because that is their platform. You know, once you know that for yourself, it's a hard lesson. But guess mentally, you will stop supporting it. At that time, it begins to die. Why? Because what you just did is take them straws out your neck that ain't passion marks and put on a turtleneck sweater with chain link on it and stuff like that. And Vampies is kind of upset because you didn't change your wardrobe. You know, but it's mental. And so after a while, you know, Vampies, you know, is like this. I got this. You know, bring that neck over here and stuff. And you know, next week he like this. You know, next week he like this, and you know, he's, you better come on over here. You know, like that paper tiger thing, talk trash. You know, y'all better come on, bring it on here, because I'm really gonna kick your kisses this time. Come here. You know, threatening you know, and this is pretty much what the United States corporation operatives are doing, just like, you know, Trump, with all due respect, talking trash. But he's talking trash, but it's a cover-up, because he's really telling the rest of the world that they acknowledge that the United States corporation is bankrupt.
Yep.
And they're arguing with their creditors. But they're still trying to convert our estate to back it up. That's the issue. And then he's also talking about the republic. But go ahead and share your thoughts.
To speak to what you were saying about the law offices, a lot of them are substitute trustees, and I'm having experiences with them myself, and they actually downsized. They fired 72 people and downsized to another smaller location.
Not good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to put a lien against them for $1 million and bankrupt them all.
Exactly.
So you allow them to escape through the back door.
Exactly.
You got
So
to lien against them and shut them down, put them out of work.
Right. So we gotta make sure that we have our trust and everything established, and reversion of estate, reversioner. I'm speaking of. I put together reversion. That closed that out, so I'm willing to share that as well.
Yeah, and also, for those of you who may not be aware of it, with the work that our Sister Light, Shalane Moore, and others have been doing in relationship to activation of Article 3, Consular Court, diversity of nationality. You already know that a few municipalities, subdivision agencies have been closing down. Yes, go ahead, brother. And because it's really when the heirs start speaking up consciously, you know, when I say, you know what I mean when I say consciously.
Consciously and competently.
Competently, yes. They can't comfortably continue to do what they've been doing. You know, and if you have a large body over a period of time active, it actually starts shutting things down. They have to start releasing people. Is because the bonds that are on the stock market that are being transferred and sold, if they're not which is what they've been having to do, meaning that eating their own tail. And that's actually what's been going on. But Isaiah, James, hold on for a minute. Isaiah, continue what you were saying in relationship to even the ones that are closed down. Expand on that for the people. And then give the mic back to the brother. Yeah.
So I did a little research into the substitute trustees, which have 6 branch locations around different territories. So, for example,
All right, when you share this with you, make points on this so that you all can do research. Go ahead.
right, so for example, the company was called Orleans PC. The original lenders, they
Alleged.
alleged lenders,
Yes.
alleged lenders was a company called Nation Star. Okay, they ended up downsizing. They changed over under Jay Bray. He's the CEO. You research him to Freedom Mortgage Company. So then when placed the lien on them, they end up downsizing. Okay, and then now they try to do a sale, alleged sale of the property, of the land, the estate, and they sold it back to the lender. Now the lender was already liened. Okay, now when you go and check the land records, they didn't add anything on the land records. The CEO sent the reversion of estate, sent the default, notice of default, sent 2 notice of defaults, sent the default, sent them a notice of intent to lien, and then follow through, because a lot of times we don't follow through. And you also got to put them, make it public, so others can.
Now, even what you're saying, and keep your train of thought. See the value where the prophet said for the Moors that our own press is the most powerful weapon in the hand of our group.
Yeah.
Then you can see, once you start looking at them FBI papers, where the grand governors and the grand chiefs of the Moorish Science Temple of America and many people who were supposedly supporting the prophet were literally responsible for tearing down that press and junking it, and not exposing that information to the Moorish Americans in the temples as a rule. And they'd be thinking it's outside Europeans. It was actually members of the Moorish Science Temple of America that destroyed the prophet's press, which is why you don't have a paper today. And the same way that the information that you're sharing today, like other information of stuff that we've been doing over the years, should be published right in that paper. It should be common knowledge all over the place. And the unfortunate thing that has been going on is, like brothers and sisters like yourself who have been, are working, really doing work in the background and have had what you call effect, not total success, but effects, which would demonstrate to them truthfully what a claim of birthright actually is. That's operative, what you call making a fiduciary claim and reversionary claim on your estate. And they'll be talking about like lost estate in the temples. And if you ask them anything about estate, they don't know. They can't even begin to give you definition. They'll start giving you beliefs and everything, and not even knowing that they're not only incompetent, they're talking about religion when you're talking about this. They don't even know how the separation of subject. Now, so again, when you share information as you're doing now, what it does, it gives people a reference point. What it also does is recognize that we're not powerless. We have not used the law as it stands for ourselves, i.e., we have not enforced that Constitution.
Islam.
And that's really the truth. And so I'm appreciating that you're sharing that and expanding on that as you have. And if you feel that there's something more that you should add, go ahead and do so. And then if not, then you pass the mic back to the brother.
Right, and didn't want to forget the step of the adverse claim that was first went out, and then the notice of default for that, and then default, and CC everybody, international community, CC Department of Agriculture, Land, CC Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, and put everybody on notice, so.
Islam.
Islam, brother.
Uh, the Lord works in mysterious ways, because one of my questions for tonight was having looked on Facebook, seeing Sister Light's
Yes.
posts related to the creation of the consular courts in Seattle or Washington,
Yes.
and her posting of shutting down a municipal police station.
Oh, yeah, and now, and I want to say this to you. You know, now our brother Sheik, you know, is Consular General, and I'm Consular General, but I'm actually in support in the background. And what it is that they're activating those principles. But I'm saying to you this, and this is what must be understood to you and others. We're not really creating consular court, so that's wrong concept. We're activating Article 3 of the Constitution for the United States in harmony with and in accord with our obligations to ourselves, which was brought to our attention by our illustrious prophet Nubu Ali, standing or coming back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing that constitution according to our own bylaws, etc. So, creating consular court would be a misnomer, because the court already exists.
Yeah.
We have not been active, meaning that the Moors have been passive. The fact that activities are accelerating on the platform gives the impression to people who don't know or are not aware that we're doing something new, or we're creating. You're not creating something. We are activating Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States, which deals with diversity of nationality, i.e., you got a nationality card? That's a statement of diversity. If you didn't know that, you know it now. Even though them grand chiefs have not been teaching the people, we know that many of them have been suppressing that information, which is why we have to come in a venue like this to get this information, because they will disallow it in many of the temples, even though they're talking about nationality. Then they'll turn around and deny the civic instruction that's necessary to support it, if you get the point, and start talking about religion. Now, this is very important. So I'm saying to you, the reason why a few of those municipalities are shutting down is because we're enforcing the Constitution. We ain't creating anything. If anything that we're creating a platform of operations for the people to now express their constitutional obligations.
A raised level of consciousness.
That's about it.
Yeah.
But the obligation existed and exists before you were born. Before the Moorish Science Temple was set up.
That's
the
right.
Moorish Science Temple was set up in order to encourage you to enforce the law. You know, and what you have is people who've been in position of authority who've been doing exactly not that. And now what you experience now, the point of it is we need the people competently conscious, which is why we need honorable Moors who really just tell the truth. And then, you know, share this information and educate the people competently, you know, in these matters, so in the different territories they can take their places among the affairs of men and start shutting down these fiduciaries with knowledge, not with emotionalism, because it ain't going to happen, not with praying on it, because that ain't going to happen, and not with seeking them to recognize that you're somebody. You need to recognize your damn self and enforce that Constitution. But continue, good brother.
So one, tonight confirms what I had only seen him in contact with on Facebook, which is that happened.
Yes. And there's other stuff that's happening too, you know. And what I would like to do, when one of the things that we're planning on doing, because Thursday I'll be leaving, I'll be going down south, because we're having a conference, on, consular, conference, because I'm a consular general, on these matters. And they'll be, giving me a full report on these matters, which we have a lot of consulars around the country who have been active and are doing these things, which includes you all who are sitting here. The international correspondences are being set up in place, and we with our limited resources, are starting to activate and connect. But again, we just simply need intelligent men and women who are brave, like the prophet said, and who are enforcing the law. And people who are coming in less naive. Because most of the people that are really getting work done have lost their naivety. Naive people can't do this kind of work. Not that they can't, they're not in the spirit mentality to get work done. They're in the spirit of passivity. So that's what you're saying. That's what you're saying, brother. And I'm glad that you're here. And the spirits like yourself, too, that will probably, in your due time, become some of the most powerful and influential people that will leave a mark for humanity that will go down in history, because all of you are making history even now as we speak. And from among you will be many who will make the mark in the current record that is being made, because in this period of time with, say, Uranus and Jupiter being on the same side in their planetary movements with the Earth, you're going to have a lot of disruptions on the planet. And a lot of things are going to be coming down. And that same thing will be reflected actually also in the actual institutional operations, that as above, so below. The operations of X Alpha are strong actually now. And so at this time, not that it doesn't take place all times, but you're going to be an accelerated dispensation of champions. That the spirits of champions that the mothers have brought here will be awakened. And so some of the people who have been in opposition to this movement will become some of its strongest supporters when they break through that blind faith thing. And some of the people who have been fronting for years in this movement will be taken down, for they have actually been enemies to the cause. And it will be predicated on the conscious level of the people, because when the people are woken up, they themselves will disallow darkness. It is they themselves who are the God principle that will disallow the darkness. And definitely in the Aquarian light, it will be disallowed anyway. So continue if you want to add to that or share some things, go ahead.
I just also saw on her page what made my eyebrows go up, which was a picture of Air Force One and the assertion that they were working to apply a lien against the plane, and that lien was having an impact.
Oh yes, that's great. Yes. Now, and this is the deal. Oh, of course.
I ain't gonna fly.
And this is the deal. What we're seeking, truthfully, is and it's particularly just like you see these young sisters sitting here, and they're always very pleasant and very quiet. And what I desire that would make me really happy is when the innocent and, for the most part, unassuming among us become the real powerful movers and shakers. Do you understand where I'm coming from? And with consciousness, that can be done and it will be done. And whereas you evolve and develop, and I know that you know for yourself, of yourself, your spiritual development in short time, and you're already climbing the ladder. Because I can see that energy on you anyway. But I know that you're conscious of it yourself. That as you evolve, and learn your lessons, that what you see, put it in the book. And when you put it in the book and then share it with the youth, you will wake up DNA in them because they're less contaminated than us, which means they have less corruption in the cycles, in the cycles of the Khazarian operations of the fiat private commercial paper. You know what I mean? And then, so they have a tendency to adopt the truth without a lot of these hang-ups, or hesitancies that are common fare amongst those who are a few generations older. And this is again why, it is said that the truth will come from the mouth of babes. And what is simply is that when the youth are exposed to the truth, they will have a tendency to operate on that truth more than those who have been held into the corrupted institutions for so many generations, because it's really most of the elders who have been protecting the blind faith systems that have actually enslaved humanity. Islam, Brother James.
Yeah, I don't think they understand what you said about the Khazarian part. I don't think they understand what that is. Khazars, they don't understand who they are.
Well, we're saying that so they can do research, because it's not the subject matter.
Yeah,
because anything that you say is, we can make a lecture off of it.
Right.
But that's to let them know that there are concepts of like say for instance, when you're looking at some of Jesus' instructions in the Bible, when he says they claim to be Jews and are not Jews.
Right.
That's the Khazarians.
Yeah.
To keep it simple.
That's a key point.
And when you're talking about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, etc., who Jesus criticized when he go down into the temples, or like in the Quran, when he's down there disputing with the doctors of the law, those are Khazarians, and then those who support their teachings are what the Europeans call conversos. And those are your Negro leader, black guys who know the truth and won't tell the truth, including some who are wearing turbans and fezzes who are seeking to enslave your own people. So you got Khazarians and supporters of Khazarians, which are called conversos. And those are traitor Moors who are claiming to be Christians. And we're not talking about spiritual, we're talking political. Now again, so when you're looking at consular court, you're looking at Article 3, Section 2, and diversity of nationality. For those of you who don't recognize the connection, write down diversity and make sure you look it up. And then look at your nationality card. And then I want to bring this to your attention too. You ever look at your nationality card that you get in the Moorish Science Temple of America, and Noble Drawley will name how many prophets on that nationality card? Yes. And then what does that represent? Diversity. And what is he really saying to you? That we're not closed into a pocket. You see? And then what do you recognize by the nationality card is a statement of diversity of nationality for protection and claim of a state. So that requires civil action in constitutional principle enforcement. And it deals with what? Estate law and trust law. And then when you look at our authority on the back of the questionnaire, that is an established platform of trustees. So you're dealing with estate and trust law. And so estate and trust law must be taught in constitutional enforcement, and those principles to the letter must be taught and maintained in order to make these people better citizens. And anything and anybody that does anything to the contrary is an enemy to the cause. And anyone who's had any position and have not done that, and there's no track record to show that they've been enforcing that Constitution, is clearly a traitor and has not been charged. Now, someone who knows Constitutional law recognizes that immediately. somebody who doesn't know constitutional law gets caught up in emotional arguments and clubism. And so the fundamentals is that the people must be taught fundamental constitutional principles so that they can start enforcing the Constitution, impartially. Their positions must be impartial. And so a consular's position, which is actually a jurisconsult, must be based in constitutional principles and maxims of law without bias or prejudice, and it must be executed with impartiality. And when it does, and you do it in an organized situation and an organized platform, it causes the de facto fiduciaries to have to start stepping back, even though they're reluctant. Why? Because it's all predicated on buying and selling bonds. And so when you start making noise, as you say, as air and competently, they can't keep moving them bonds. You don't have to capture them. You're choking them. You'll never capture the straw man because they ain't giving them up. That's like telling the vampire to unscrew his fangs. It's not happening. He's, talking about why don't you put crazy glue on the tips? No, he's not going to do that. Why don't you recognize that you're going to have to prepare yourself that his fangs can't work on you. Even if you like garlic sandwiches so he don't like your blood, whatever. But, as far as trying to make him reform, he ain't going to reform. Like you always say, the European ain't going to act right until he faces death in the face. And that's just the truth. And so any appeal to morality or to ethics is not going to happen. Stop wasting your time. You're going to have to enforce that Constitution and start shutting his institutions down. And you can start doing that by what? Destroying blind faith. Because it's the people's blind faith in the institutions that cause them to live. That's the bloodline. That's their lifeline. And so this is, again, why it's important for people to understand, even when you're talking about bloodline and lifeline, you're talking also metaphorically and not necessarily actually blood. You're talking about multiple levels. And when you're talking about, even when you're dealing with the philosophical statements that you will discover in ancient Yucatan in Egypt, that they always have multifaceted level meanings and not to be taken always literally, or anthropomorphically, so that's important also. Are there any other questions? Or any other thoughts? So again, we chose to deal with the National Lawyers Guild to remind you to tie that to the operations of the Crown, and this is very important. And write this down so you'll never forget it. The bankers, lawyers, and attorneys operating from England and North America comprises the Crown. Keep that in mind. They comprise the Crown. Now, again, the brother shared with me the Zodiac Constitution, and I'm going to read Article 7 of the Zodiac Constitution, registered in the Library of Congress under the certificate AA 222141, CM Bay, etc., and looking at that in harmony with the enforcement of the Constitution as per the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, including looking at Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws of the Moorish Science Temple of America, Moorish Holy Temple of Science, Moorish Temple of Science, ETC, Moorish Divine and National Movement of the World, etc., in relationship to the restoration of the lost estate of the Moors, etc., and the responsibility of the Moors as heirs to step up to that constitutional fold of government with a consciousness and not with a rhetorical statement alone. Article 7. The Moorish Americans' freedom and legal rights, actually, in the Christian Union courtroom. In the Christian Union courtroom, and those are actually commercial venues for human trafficking, the Moors cannot be forced to remove their red fez from their heads, nor can they be forced to raise their hand and take an oath over the Christian Bible. Neither can Moors, the Beys and Eels, employ, quote unquote, white or Negro lawyers to represent them. The reason for this is that, quote unquote, white people, and you know that's the Knights of Columbus, Ku Klux Klan oath of 54 and 63, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Illinois, after the split of the Whigamo Party, dealing with status and not necessary complexion. That must be understood when you're reading this. And their Negro slaves definitely cannot represent free Moorish Americans. And therefore, you must what? Present yourself. Therefore, it's important for you to be competent. Now, the Negro is the property of the Union States slaveholders. And the Moors must respect the court by saying, I affirm, and here the court has no jurisdiction over them, which automatically makes them qualified to defend themselves by their Zodiac Constitution law and their mathematical number 9. The number 9 corresponds with the letter I, based on the 9 months from conception to birth, which makes you, yourself, the great I am. And the highest law of self-protection and self-preservation in harmony with your Zodiac 12 signs, unchanged constitution, moral law of 360 degrees squared by your number 9. The more meaning the earth, the moon, the sun, and the 7 planets, or the chronology zodiac record of the Moorish nation of the North Gate, North America. The name Muhammad, prophet, religion, God, church, temple, and mosque were established by the Dutch Anglo-Saxon priesthood, Franciscan fathers of North, who overthrew the Moorish society of Islam between 1789 and the Union of 1863. The Moors, the Beys, and Eels must never attempt to teach or lecture in the Christian institutions, namely church, temple, mosque, school, and hall. And this is a violation of the Union Society States' Rights Magna Carta Code of Mary and Christ. The truth of the Moorish Zodiac Constitution law and moral human principles definitely conflicts with the Christian Union customs and doctrine of the Magna Carta from every angle. Nor do not criticize the quote-unquote white people for belief in the religion of their sun and woman image. Nor do not ever attempt to influence the quote-unquote white people to accept the oral, moral truth and principles of your 12 sign zodiac constitution law, because the Magna Carta is a Latin phrase meaning magnet charter of white people's economic and social attraction only, which had its beginning in the colonies of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and Illinois in 1848 and 1854. If the lawmakers of the 50 Union States Society of North America should attempt to ignore the Moorish American Zodiac law and birthrights of this Constitution, it would be an act of supreme violation of their own Magna Carta. Wa alaikum assalam. Zodiac Constitution, Article 7, registered in the Library of Congress. All the adepts know it, all the Kyplos know it, all the politicians know it, all the Eastern Stars know it, all the Masons know it, all Illuminati know it, all Templars know it. The only ones haven't been knowing it is the Moorish Americans themselves, who are the heirs to the world's largest estate, as they've been buried in the dark north under the Christian black codes and believe that human beings are crayons. It is time for you to wake up, tell the truth, expose the history, and don't pretend anymore that these sheiks, grand sheiks, addicts, and other people with title didn't have this information because it's registered in the Library of Congress and they got their degrees by it and have been betraying the prophet and betraying you. So it's up to you to take the truth and move it to the hedges and the highways, or stay in the Negro black color codes and be destroyed, which is what their intention is to do. I thank you for coming out to the House of Reawakening Minds and sharing your time with us. I respect you for that. I would say to you, keep notes, always keep a critical ear, accept nothing without research. Do research. We will give you reference points so you can do research. And I again thank Tamara for maintaining the integrity of the camera work. I respectfully thank Dr. Naila Gilliam for maintaining her integrity and her honor to the uplifting of fallen humanity, and maintaining a house where free thought moves, where people who do research have a platform by which they can share this information with the people, unrestricted by people who have been suppressing information, who themselves should have been teaching this information anyway. But we don't need for them to do it because we have enough honorable men and women who've been coming to this platform at the House of Reawakening Minds, seeing that the people get this information. And with that, I give you all a grand evening and a good thought and goodwill. And have a good night.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you for coming out and taking in the House of Reawakening Minds. Friday, November 9th, we have our brother Abdullah El Talib Mosey Bey. He will be teaching at House of Reawakening Minds. And his topic, let me pull that up. His topic is creating social harmony through a proper view of masonry and religion. On Saturday, November 10th, from 5 to 10, we have our brother, Aaron, who will have the writ workshop. Moors, get your writ together. Please come out. We will also Facebook Live, both events next Friday as well as Saturday. We would like to thank our wonderful sponsors, people who have heeded to our, just the word of being able to support House of Reawakening Minds. We have people who travel. We have a group here who traveled all the way from the territory of Wisconsin.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
So that is wonderful. That is wonderful to know. And the thing about it, we have people who live right around the corner that will not even walk around the corner. So to come from Wisconsin, oh my gosh, I remember that last ride. That is a wonderful thing. We have people that tune in from all over the globe, and also to want to make sure that the lights stay on, the cameras stay rolling. I would like to personally thank Dr. Gilliam. I don't think, could you go up front? Could you go up front?
You got some.
We on camera? No, we're not on camera. Could you go up front?
All right.
I think we need to. Well, I think you need to hurry up. Come on. Yes. I would like to, come on now, hurry up.
I'm here.
I would like to personally thank Dr. Gilliam. I don't think she get enough recognition. You're out of the camera.
Exactly.
Why you out of the camera?
Yes. And
You know the team.
to be up here more often. We're going to try to
I
get her
would
to
like to
interject.
I would like to personally say this. I don't think a lot of people understand the sacrifice.
Yes.
She's made a lot of sacrifice, not only spiritually, financially.
Yes.
She put a lot into just making sure this platform stayed grounded, rooted in the work. She allowed the doors to be open for anyone who has the vision to want to assist in helping the fallen humanity. it takes nothing away from the prophet because we are moving in that area. I would like to personally thank you. I do. Because, I mean, you're a phenomenal woman.
Yes,
I
she
think
is.
you're doing a wonderful job. And our teachers are awesome. Grand Sheik, he's awesome. He travels everywhere, but he makes sure he is here every first and third Friday. You know, our brother Abdullah El Talib Mosey Bey, our brother Father Hannibal Bey, and a lot of times, a lot of these seats are not even full, and they don't care. They don't care if they're teaching one person. They're going to make sure they're doing the work. It's very important. 2019, we're coming into some very important times spiritually. You can feel it in the atmosphere. Yeah. It's time for us to raise up. You know, we thought about, I was talking to Brother Abdullah, we talk a lot. He's become oh my God, he teaches me so much. Yeah. And what we were saying, you know, the amazing thing of the movement, they did not have internet and Facebook. And they went out, as you said, Grand Sheik, to the highways and byways. Yes. We have to be able to take these numbers and go and be able to connect. And you know, Facebook is great. Facebook has opened up the eyes and minds of people, you know, when the work had to go underground a little bit because of the corruption that exists and things of that nature. But it's time for us to really do the work. Yes. Because we have to wake our people up. Yes.
And I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for your support of the House of Reawakening Minds. Many of you over the past 7 years have enjoyed the videos that end up on YouTube, and thanks to all the people that put them on YouTube. But we do keep our videos now at our House of Reawakening Minds Facebook page until we get savvy. I want to say thank you, a big thank you. Of course, you know how I feel about Grand Sheik. He's my big brother. But Sister Tamara and I have been working together for about a year. We just hit an anniversary hallmark, and we didn't even say anything about it. Right, but about a year, and she came here for something totally different, and then saw a need, and said, you know, I have this skill set, and I would love to connect with you and be a part of it. She does it, you know, without, you know, she's never put her hand out and say, Dr. G, you got to pay me. I mean, she's a professional, she's degreed, but she volunteers, and she's a part, and just as much a part of House of Reawakening Minds as myself and Grand Sheik. And I'm grateful to you, Sister Tamara, even though you're tough on me. But I have a son that's her age too, but she treats me like she's my mama. So, but I respect her. I respect what she brings to the table. So age doesn't have anything to do with it. Just like I respect, you know, Brother Isaiah L. I probably have children older than him. I know I do. But he's an awesome young man. He's one of those ones that, you know, I'm not sure if that's who you were talking to about putting stuff in the book, but I just posted something. The Baltimore group, they just, and I'm thinking that you did a lot on this, brand new website, www.readmore, you know which more, aboutit.com. You've got to go to that website, and you, not just once, because it's a news, a resource, an alert. Will you be able to post your legal notices there? Yeah. Legal notice posting, thing where you need to post something legally, and so you'll be able to do that right there. So, you know, please visit the website. Please visit, you know, Rise of the Moors. Please visit .org. Please visit the Moorish American Consulate.org and whatever else. Look at that.
Our Voices.
Oh yes, please go to
ourvoices.online.
Ourvoices.online.
That's it.
Okay. Ourvoices.online. Are you still in the Play Store?
Yep, and in the Play Store.
In the Google Play Store, Our Voices. It's a black and gold app. You'll know it, and you'll hear our Brother Truth interviewing various sundry people. A lot of interviews with Grand Sheik. A lot of commentary that he himself does, and you know. So as we are doing these things, you we want to be a resource. We want to make sure we want to shout out to the world because we have this platform, what the rest of us are doing. Because we know that you all are going to look at this, if nothing else, because you want to see Grand Sheik. So it's a great place to let us know what you're doing so we can spread the word. And as Sister Chairman said, I'm also the receptionist for the House of Reawakening Minds. And many of you out there watching know that you have called me from very, and most people get about anywhere from a half an hour to an hour of my time. I'm retired, but I work every day fielding calls for people that are just coming into finding his videos after 7 years or something, or 4 years, and they're like, and I finally found a number, and you answered. And I listen. I can't always answer the questions. I can't always get people in touch with Grand Sheik. I try to tell him you have to come to class. He'll talk to everybody in class. But if he does not have the time, I want y'all to hear this on video because it's going to get out there. He does not have the time for you to call me and ask me to have him to call you because he's not going to do that. It's just not going to happen that way. He's too busy. And but he is a jewel to the nations. We should not tax him that way. We can't do that. And those that are coming up the ranks, you got to get it. I'm a senior citizen. I'm retired. I'm 63. I'll be 64 in a couple months, and he's even older. So it is you all who are younger that are going to be tasked with taking this knowledge and being able to keep this going on. I don't expect Grand Sheik to have to teach until he's 80. He needs some rest time. And I know you didn't call me up here for this, but I'm saying this. A brother called me the other day, 2 days ago, and he just discovered you over the last, very recently. And he is so concerned about not just, he said he looks like, and he said the first time I saw him, he looks tired. He'd been sick about 2 months ago. And you'll see, if you've seen him in other videos, he lost a lot of weight, and he hasn't picked back up his face, but people watch. The brother picked it up on the video. And he said, we got to do something. And I'm saying in front of him because I can't do many things behind his back. And I just want to put this out there. When he gets ready to retire, you mentioned about the people who have transitioned and people scrambling to help him when they're sick. Well, while he's not sick, while he's still got his strength, we need to be working on a fund to make sure, because he works for himself. He works for y'all, really. And he's cooking, he's fixing people's houses and steps and this and that and the other at almost 73. And I'm just saying that, when you hear me come to you, I'm going to come to you because we're going to do something and put them aside so that he can be comfortable. We cannot not do this. And that's not why you called me up here, because I didn't even going to call me up here, but since I'm up here, since I'm up here, you know what I mean? Since I have your attention, when we come to you and say we want to do something special for our National Grand Sheik, who you all say you love, who you all say was the reason why, you became enlightened and awakened to the fact that you are more and you're not Negro, black, and colored, then we need to do something to make sure that when he says, you know what, I don't want to have to build nobody else's steps or make, you guys finish my bathroom.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Got the toilet and no sink. But we'll do anyway, anyway. But no.
Gotta finish that bathroom.
But trust me,
He's very skilled.
the toilet is the most important part of the bathroom because it's a sink sometimes. But no, what I'm saying is I want to do something. I want us to think about how we can set aside. We talk about all kinds of, trusts and this and that. He's an international treasure.
That's right.
He's not a national treasure. He's an international treasure. So, we need to think about that and how we can come together. Y'all know how to call me for everything else. We gonna put something specifically aside so that if and when he decides he can't or doesn't want to, and he just wants to go sit back on his laurels, rest on his laurels, he can do it comfortably. Y'all agree with me? Islam. So I thank you. I thank, like I said, each and every one of you, especially you all that are faithful and come all the time. There are some that can't get here, but when you do, those who support, financially, Brother Troy Douglas, you're one of the major supporters. We appreciate you. And I have names of, Brother John Hayes and Sister Sharita Douglas and Sister, Shafnet. There's some of you, and I shouldn't start calling names because I got to make the list because there's a bunch of you that support us. And we are appreciative of it. You have made my load lighter because the only thing we have here is Friday nights and some Saturdays. And we forgot to say Brother Aaron L. when you were mentioning this. But we have sometimes a Saturday, but we have 4 days a month pretty much that we know we're having something. That's how we keep the lights on here. And we haven't perfected that dead pledge thing yet, so we still pay a mortgage here. 6 more years got to go. If y'all want to pay it off, we can do that. But to make sure that you're here, I'll make the payment. We make the payment every month, just so we make sure we can still turn on the lights and turn the key. You see what I mean? For right now, we still have it, but we've been able to do it. When people thought this house would fall because it was no longer a church, because we were no longer preaching, and that they waited. I might as well have been Paul who got bit by the snake. Yeah, they was waiting to see if I was gonna fall dead. You know what I mean? Because the viper was on me. But no, because this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to reawaken minds, and I'm so grateful when I met Grand Sheik in 2011, and he said, yes, I'll come, and has not stopped coming ever since. And that's why a lot of those videos out there, everywhere from Egyptian pictures on the background, y'all see some of that, all that's here. And now what it looks like now, he did this. We're still working on it and so forth, and we got work to do in the basement and different things, but at least you have a place to come. This belongs to the nation. This it's not my church and it's not my ministry. This belongs to the nation, and it'll be here as long as we want it to be here. But like I said, my main thought of late is I want to make sure that this man is taken care of. There's too many of us that love him all over the world for it to be any other way. So I thank you. Thank you for traveling all the way from Wisconsin. And
give him a hand.
You know what he said to me? He said, come on up. He said, I'm from Puerto Rico and I was afraid that I couldn't come here. I'm like, I said, brother, you're over.
Brother John, Moro.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Right on. And remember, this is the history. When the Europeans came to the north,
Move over this one a bit.
yeah, they came mainly to the Carib and Arawak and Taino Moors to the south.
That's right.
Right? And our culture is matriarchy. And it's always been the traditional culture in Asia and Africa, whereas the wealth was maintained on the woman.
That's right.
And because we always had the gold and the silver on the women, and as a matter of fact, the gold and the silver you would take it off, it would be molded onto them. They would carry the wealth, because that is the key to inheritances.
That's right.
Etc. Now, so when the Europeans came here and they came to the Atlantis Islands, they decimated the islands. I mean, they just murdered and slaughtered. And one of the things that the Christian says, and don't equate the Christians with Jesus. That's a fraud. They're Cretans. They're actually Constantinians. And the Crusades. And they would murder the women, cut their heads off, and cut their arms off to steal the gold because it was banded on them. And they would go back to England and to Aragon and Castile, which is later called Spain. That ain't called Spain then. It's Castile, Aragon, and the German tribes, and say, damn, this is a rich port. And so they called Borican, San Juan, Puerto Rico, which means rich port. That's not the name of the people. They're Borican, Taino, and Arawak. They're Moors. And so don't get it confused. And they used a lot of the Moorish young girls as sex slaves. So when you see our different complexions, don't think that we ain't the same people. You're the same people. Welcome home, brother, sister. Thank you for visiting us, and we love you. You know, and when you know the real history, you don't play that division game. So when that Europeans start trying to treat our brothers and sisters like they're foreigners coming here, you straighten that shit up.
That's right.
Because they're the only foreigners. Thank you, give them a hand. We love you, we love you. Thank you, brother. And you all, again, have a good night. And you need to know your own history.
That's right.
You need to know your history. But thank you all. And Keys, when the young brothers and sisters really get this knowledge, that's what we want. We want them to start taking the lead. And when we say the lead, with knowledge,
That's right.
you know, and so again, without being overburdening or duplicitous, I want to thank yourself, good brother, and yourself, good brother, and we know that we're busy, but we want you to know that your work is not going unnoticed or unappreciated. It absolutely is. And as me and Truth Walker was talking earlier today, and this is a reminder, and this is not, you know, it's just like we're just so burdened.
Right.
We're so burdened, you know, and as I get older, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to put it, I've been moving around the country more than I've ever done. And I have more burdens to do more things than I've ever done. But I have not forgotten.
All right.
And we will get together on productions of the literature that will be coming from that site. And I want that to be the main site where my literature is officially issued.
Islam.
Are we clear? So I'm saying that for the record now. And Tamara also has been offering to help forever. And Dr. Naila has been in the background encouraging and helping. And they've been working in the background. And I do want you all to understand that I am not intentionally remiss of that responsibility. It's just that I'm so burdened, pulled from so many areas. You know, I need to be 5 people. And by default, I'm at least 3.5.
There you go.
You know what I mean? But it is important because of the degrees of the consciousness that's growing around the country and off the shores. Because I've been getting a lot of pressure calls from Palestine and from Honduras, a few from Ecuador, and definitely from Haiti. You know, and the people, some of the people think that we're bigger than we are. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, I'm just tired of guy with cheap sneaks, you know, working just like everybody else do, and then trying to do the work for the nation in between, wearing myself out doing it. But I'm not doing what I don't love to do. I'm doing what I'm born to do.
Wow.
So this is not a burden to me. It is what I'm born to do. You know, so if there's anything, this is what I'll do till I stop breathing, if you get the point.
Wow.
However, I refer to you all as the cheated generations, because you've been cheated. Decades ago. And I trust that you respect that when I do this, I'm not putting my ego in it, because it has nothing to do with ego. It has to do with the sincere desire who have been stagnating the progress of the Moors while wearing turbans and fezzes on and holding offices that should have been held by more honorable people for generations. And with that, I relieve you of my burdenous voice and I say, have a grand evening and a grand rising on the morrow. Peace, brother. Thank you all for coming.